We'll be beginning our meeting in just a moment. Good evening, everyone. We will call the March 4, 2013 City Council meeting to order. First order of business is roll call and determination of the quorum. Charlene.
Sasso. Here. Clayton. Here. Nordstrom. Here. Scott. Here. Peterson. Doyle. Here. Lewis. Here. Roberts. Here. Wright. Here. Lorente. Here. We have quorum.
And just for the record, our council president, Bonnie Peterson, is representing the city along with economic development at a trade mission in Houston, Texas. So we wish her all the best at that, and she is not at the meeting tonight for that reason. We will now have the invocation from Father Nathan Sparks from the cathedral.
Let us begin with some words from Psalm 33. A king is not saved by a mighty army, nor a warrior delivered by great strength. Useless is the horse for safety. Great though its strength, it cannot provide escape. But see, the eyes of the Lord are upon those who fear him, upon those who hope for his kindness, to deliver them from death and preserve them in spite of famine. Our soul waits for the Lord, who is our help and our shield. For in him our hearts rejoice. In his holy name we trust. May your kindness, O Lord, be upon us who have put our hope in you. Let us pray. Almighty Father, we ask you to send your Holy Spirit of truth upon those entrusted with caring for the common good of the people of Rapid City. Give them wisdom, sound judgment, and a true love for the people they serve. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Father Nathan. And now we will move on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes to tonight's agenda? Any additions or changes? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the agenda? We have a motion by Scott and a second by Doyle. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We do not have Citizen of the Month recognition tonight. That has been postponed to the next City Council meeting. We'll now take general public comment. This is a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken to be on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of council members present. I do not have any speaker request forms for general public comment. Did I miss anyone? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment for items 2 through 44. Can we have a motion to open public comment? Motion by Doyle, second by Scott. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We will first go to Brent Voorhees on item 30. He did say he would only like to speak in case the item is pulled. This is a time, sir, for you to make your comments, and once public comment is closed, only if there's a question from the council. So I would advise you make your comments now if you have any thoughts on this item. Do you want to wait? Okay. All right. So you're standing by for questions. All right. I do not have any further speaker request forms on item 2 through 44. Did I miss anyone? Did I miss anyone? Okay. We have a motion to close by Doyle and a second by Scott. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're now on consent items 2 through 44. Any council members like to remove any items for separate consideration? Ron Sasso.
Item 2, just for an adjustment to the minutes.
Item 2. Jerry Wright.
I'd like to pull item 20 and table it as that action, we're not successful in that application for the grant. And also I'd like to pull 19 and 30 for discussion.
So far we have 2, 19, 20, and 30. Amanda.
Thank you. I'd like to pull number 12, 25, 27, 29, 36, and 37. (12), 25, 27, 29, 36, 37.
Okay, Richie.
Item number 32, please.
Okay, I'll read off what we have. 2, 12, 19, 20, 25, 27, 29, 30, 32, 36, 37. Anything else? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the balance of consent? Motion by Scott, second by Roberts. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. First item is item number 2. This is approving the minutes for February 19, 2013 council meeting. Do we have a motion? We have a motion and a second for approval. We'll go to Ron Sasso for discussion. Ron?
Just wanted to make a very minor adjustment on page 16 in the minutes, just that it says I addressed a concern. It actually should have said I expressed my concern on an item, so just a minor adjustment on that.
Okay. Which page in the minutes is that?
16.
On page 16? Does the motion maker have access to page 16? Are you okay with the, okay? The motion maker, Chad Lewis, is okay with the friendly amendment, and that's okay with the seconder? Jerry Wright? Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item number 12. Jerry, if you could read this in the agenda for us.
Item 12 is an item to authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign an agreement between Doyle Estes and Catherine Johnson in the city of Rapid City extending time for development of the property, quote, the future soccer complex site. I yield the floor.
Do we have a motion or any discussion? We have a motion by Lewis and a second by Doyle for approval, and we'll go to Amanda Scott.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask the city attorney for clarification, a question.
Go ahead.
Joel, just for clarification, this agreement simply just extends the date of this contract. There is no monetary compensation. There is no other negotiation. It is strictly just the date on this contract that has been extended, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Yield the floor.
Okay, we do have a motion for approval. Any further discussion? Item number 12. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item 19, Jerry.
Item 19 is approved request from Brent Voorhees and Matt Ben of an exception to waive the requirement to install a sidewalk and an access easement per city ordinance. Where the property is located at 4560 Cliff Drive and 4670 Cliff Drive, existing lot AR of lot 4R of block 15 and existing lot 5R of block 15, Canyon Lake Heights subdivision, section 8, township 1 north, range 7 east, Rapid City, Pennington County, South Dakota. I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Wright and a second by Doyle to approve. Any discussion?
I have some discussion, but more directly towards item 30, which is related to the same plat. I think I'll withhold my discussions till then, if that's okay.
Okay. Brett, I'd like to ask a question of you. How is 19 linked to 30, and can and should it be separately considered?
Or I can address my concerns right now, if you want me to.
Mayor, if I
Terry.
could, I really think they are totally separate issues. One's really dealing with the sidewalk exception up along Cliff Drive. The other
Okay,
one is
I
dealing
have
with
a
the
motion.
exception to the design standards.
Okay, vote on 19 then.
We do have a motion then to approve item 19. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're now on item number 20. Jerry?
Item 20 is to authorize staff to submit an application for a First Interstate Bank System Foundation grant for a total of $3,878 to increase elementary school students' education for recycling. I understand we were not successful, so I make a motion to table this item.
Okay. We have a motion by Wright and a second by Scott to table. No discussion on a tabling motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item is tabled. 25. Jerry?
Item 25 is an item to renew the contract with Pete Lean and Sons Incorporated for ready-mix concrete for 1 year. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Wright and a second by Doyle for approval, and we'll have one abstention.
One abstention, thank you.
One abstention from Amanda Scott. Any discussion on this motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries, and the abstention from Amanda Scott is noted. Item 27. Jerry?
Item 27 is to authorize staff to advertise bids for the 2013-2015 custodial services in various park facilities. I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Wright, second by Lewis for approval. We'll go to Amanda Scott.
Thank you. I'd like to pose just a couple questions to the Parks and Rec Director, Jeff Biegler, if I may.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Jeff.
Hi.
Just wanted some clarification points on this. This is a 3-year contract, is that correct?
That is correct.
Has the past contracts been 3-year contracts in the past?
No, they have been one-year contracts since we first began contracting the service out in 2006.
And the reason for going to a 3-year contract at this point?
It just was a time saver, and it just made sense to extend it to a 3-year rather than the 1 year, and come back every year for a new contract.
I see based on the proposal or amount, it's estimated to be roughly about $75,000, so you're looking for an extension on this contract for $75,000 for 3 years locked in?
Correct.
And what was the cost of the previous 3 years contracts?
The last year was the first year in which we received a bid beside the Black Hills Works bid. And last year, the contract was for $68,000, but the previous contracts, the previous 3 years, were $80,464. Year before that, 2010 was $79,303. Year before that was $76,798.
All right.
So it has varied due to increasing duration of the contract by a couple of weeks, and also the addition of a couple of new sites, the Vicky Powers site and the Founders Park restroom site.
And so you're anticipating just 1 or 2 interested parties in order to participate in this bidding process?
That is correct.
All right. Well, good luck with your bid.
Thank you.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're now on item 29. Jerry?
Item 29 is to approve a memorandum of agreement between the City of Rapid City and Derby Advertising Incorporated, doing business as Canyon Lake Resort, for park amenities in West Canyon Lake Park, and I make a motion to approve.
Second. Motion by Wright, second by Roberts, and we'll go to Amanda Scott. Amanda?
Thank you. I'd like to ask just a couple follow-up questions from the Public Works discussion to Mr. Jeff Biegler, please, if I may.
Go ahead.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
As you and I have discussed, this is in the, and I like the term from the Public Works meeting, Goose Landing area of the Canyon Lake Park. One of the questions I have is that, and just for clarification, Derby plans on, or I should say Canyon Lake Resort, plans on constructing the horseshoe pits, the croquet courses, and the volleyball courses, and then actually it's being turned right back over to Parks and Rec.
Correct. It will be the property of the city of Rapid City and the Parks and Recreation Department. The improvements themselves will be maintained by the Canyon Lake Chop House. The Parks Department will maintain the rest of the area around that, just as we are today.
And have the two of you discussed any way to try to mitigate the geese from landing and partaking in this area once these courts have been installed?
Well, we will address that if it becomes more of an issue. We've found in the past that areas where there's more use and more of the public frequenting sometimes tends to disperse the geese, and we're hoping that that's the case here. If it's not, we'll address that at that time.
All right. And another follow-up question. Since this is being turned back to Parks and Rec, and I understand when I read the agreement that the Chop House plans on having some equipment that can be rented in case people show up and they don't have horseshoes or croquet mallets, you know, that type of stuff.
Correct.
But if people have their own, because horseshoes, I've seen people, they're kind of like pool people. They have their own horseshoes and they love them, and they can only win with those horseshoes. If they happen to have their own set of horseshoes, they can play on the course during normal park hours. There's no other fee or registration or.
That's correct. It will be open to the public, and unless there's a croquet tournament or something going on, then it would be open to the public, yes.
All right. Well, thank you for that clarification. I think it will benefit the whole city as a whole, because I know there's a lot of people from many wards that currently enjoy Canyon Lake Park. So good luck with the geese.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. We'll go to Richie Nordstrom. Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, a couple of questions for you. First of all, a comment is that I know some retired canine police dogs that would be able to assist us in that area if we have that, if we have to go in that the discussion. I haven't cleared that with Carl yet, but I know we've visited with some other police officers that were interested in that. Do we have a lease agreement or an MOU or something like that with the Chop House? How does that work?
It will be a memorandum of agreement. That's what is before us this evening, and what that will do will be to allow them then to submit actual design plans to us. We just have concept plans at the moment.
And then I'm curious about if the, heaven forbid, the Chop House ever decides to leave that location, is the transition discussion a necessary item to put in that MOU?
It will be turned over. It will become city property essentially if that were to happen.
Thank you. I'll yield.
And we'll go to Ron Sasso. Ron.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is one that, again, is really a win-win situation where, the city wins, that area wins, citizens win out. And also, I know I had received some questions from the Canyon Lake Campground nearby, and explained to them that that will be city property, and that their people staying there will be able to use those facilities except when there are tournaments at play. So it really is a great public-private partnership. So thank you.
Thank you. We do have 3 speaker request forms that just came in. Carmen, would you like to speak to this item? And normally, before we get started, normally public comment is closed, but since they come in after that time, we'll go ahead and allow the comments. So go ahead.
Good evening.
Oh, we don't need to do that. Go ahead.
Carmen Derby from Canyon Lake Chop House, Canyon Lake Resort. We're specifically here just to answer any questions or if we can discuss anything in regards to the croquet courts. My experts on the croquets are the other 2 speaker request forms. So purely if you have questions or if we can further provide you with any other information, we'll do what we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the additional 2 speaker request forms, you'd like to decline comment at this time, or would you like to speak? Okay.
My name is Gay Turter, and I started this whole thing by putting an article in the Journal, and had gotten a thank you, sending one to the council, and gotten a thank you note back from Mayor Cokier. I'd like to introduce Ron Eccles. He is a specialist on croquet courts and getting people to play and whatever. I'd like you to hear from him for just a few moments. Thank you.
We'll go to Ron Eccles.
I won't take much of your time. I just want to applaud you for moving ahead on this project. I'm also the regional president of the United States Croquet Association and president of the Denver Croquet Club, and I think you'll find that adding this to Rapid City will be a very nice addition to the city. And I spent my youth growing up here, and so I'm excited to be back up in town to see one of the sports that I love coming to the city. So thank you.
Moving back?
Not at the moment, I'm not.
Should consider doing that.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go to Richie Nordstrom.
A question for Carmen, if I may. Carmen, it's been a while since I've seen you. I made a comment here a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, about your being on both sides of your kitchen door, and I know that comment went by a lot of people, meaning that you folks do an excellent job on both sides of that kitchen door, meaning very fine job inside of the kitchen and also with the patrons and customers that you have.
Thank you.
And I applaud your work and everything that you do that. Now I can also say you will be able to do a very fine job on both sides of the front door.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Carmen, while you're here, and I know this is slightly off topic, but can you recall the date of the soft opening for the Meadowbrook?
Well, positively for Meadowbrook, we will be opening on April 1st. Past that, we just got the keys on last Friday, and we have to do some updates to some of the computer equipment. which I know is probably going to take at least 2 weeks to get the software up and running for the PosiTouch system, which is the register system. We're currently working on all of the menus, which all need input into the system besides. So April 1st is a guarantee. Past that, I can't give you, I mean, we hope to open before that, but I can't give you a guaranteed date before that.
Very
But
good.
positively by April 1st.
All right. April Fool's Day, and that's no joke.
Exactly.
Very good, thank you. We have no further lights. The motion on the floor is to approve. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're now on to item number 30. Jerry.
Item 30 is to approve the request with the stipulations of a residential fire suppression system and property fire mitigation for an exception from Spurlick Consulting Incorporated for Matt Benny and Brent Voorhees to waive the requirements to install additional pavement width and to provide additional easements for the proposed access easement for the properties located at 4560 Cliff Drive and 4670 Cliff Drive in the existing Lot AR of Lot 4R of Block 15 and existing Lot 5R of Block 15 in Canyon Lake Heights, Rapid City, Pennington County, South Dakota. I'd like to make a motion to send this back to Public Works for the discussion, and if I may comment.
Do we have a second? I'll second it. We have a motion by Wright and a second by Nordstrom to send this back to Public Works. And Jerry, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't here Tuesday to participate in this, but when I started looking into this, I think there are a lot of questions raised, and I know that some of this may occur in the plating or whatever is going to occur, but when I read there's a 12-foot wide paved surface serving potentially 3 homes, and there could be more, looking at the property. I think there's some water provision issues to be considered. The property, as I see it, would be landlocked with access being controlled by an easement, which is a 12-foot driveway. Sizable Lot 5R could also be further developed. It has the potential. And I come from an area of Rapid City where we call it the Chambers Edition, where we have a lot of lots that are 240 feet deep or better, 150 feet deep, limited access, roads that are 20 feet wide or narrower. I also know that if we were needed to put a sewer system into that area, we have an ordinance that says the service lines must not be on other property. They must be either privately owned service lines on the property they're serving, or they must be on the right-of-way. I don't know how that's possible if we were to go to a centralized sewer. A lot of questions I have on this, and I'm looking down the track. Today, this may not be an issue, but I think in 5 or 10 or 15 or longer, it could well be a bigger issue. And I think looking at our past patterns of development, I don't like it when we start recreating and repeating history. So I like this to go back for some better engineering by the consultant it's involved. I would certainly be willing to work with the owners and the consultant, but I think it needs more work. And with that, I yield the floor.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 30. We'll go to Ron Sasso.
Thank you, Mayor. And I thank you, Jerry, for those concerns. I know at Public Works we did discuss quite a few of the issues that related to this property. I think one of the things that to me was very important as far as dealing with the water flows, they're looking at the sprinkler systems for the home, which is excellent, and basically the scenario at which what they are looking at is basically having a parent home on that property. And I know we visited, and I guess I don't know if Terry, if you'd like to address anything here, rather than if we can avoid having to send it back to Public Works, I think that would be preferable. But I don't know if we'd be able to alleviate your concerns, but I know I had raised some concerns, and I felt that they were addressed adequately at that time.
We'll go to Chad Lewis.
I'd like to make substitute motion to approve, please.
We have a substitute motion to approve, and we have a second by Sasso. We are now discussing the
I yield the floor.
Floor has been yielded, and we'll go to Jerry Wright.
I think that would be an irresponsible action by this council to approve this particular development without giving at least a better address to the concerns that I've raised. A couple of weeks or a month delay is not much. I understand that people want to move on, but when we build a home, and let's say we're going to build it for a parent or somewhere, those situations change. And ultimately, that piece of property will change and be sold, I would assume, which is going to call for a subdivision of the property. I don't think there's anything worse than to have a 12-foot wide easement into 3 to 5 homes when they deserve better. I mean, that's our job as a city, to make sure that as we develop, that we develop in a pattern that's affordable and safe for our people. It isn't always maybe easy for the petitioner to face potential higher costs, and I'm not trying to do that to them. That's not my purpose. I just think there are some very legitimate reasons that need to be discussed and resolved, and they're not going to be resolved by approving it. And there will be problems in the future, I guarantee it. I don't know how many of you have been out with a heavy truck in this type of territory, and it's snowy, and you get off that very narrow 12-foot path, and you're up to your axles, you can't move. I've never done that with fire trucks, but I've done it with snowplows. And I don't think it's a good situation to put 3 to 5 homes in that situation. If you want to think about it, I would suggest you go down into the Chamber, drive Plum Tree Lane or some of those other places in Canyon Lake, and get an eye-opener. Thank you. I will not support approving this.
Thank you, Jerry. We'll go to Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. My question, and maybe even a concern, is for Chief Multivern. We heard a report at the Public Works Committee meeting about the fire prevention folks being satisfied with the 12-foot width. I also had a question about the potential of having this be a cul-de-sac instead of the 12-foot width. Could you address those 2 points for us?
Thank you. Yes, in speaking with Fire Marshal Assistant Chief Tim Billings, he did review this today. As a matter of fact, I had a request just to make sure I was brief for this evening, and he said that in terms of the fire department supporting this project, we would normally would like to see wider roads and cul-de-sacs for turnarounds of our larger apparatus. However, as you have heard us use the example of fire sprinklers as a tool in the toolbox, we can offset a number of those requirements for that area if we do require a residential fire sprinkler to be placed in that home, and that is the intent with this project. So we are in full support in terms of, at least for the fire department. So. And also the other thing that they're going to comply with is some fuels mitigation, which, as you know, we have a number of different programs going on in that area right now to eliminate some of the fuel buildup in that area and for the potential of wildfires. So they're also going to comply with that request.
To address Alderman Wright's concerns, that's what sold me, is that the fire department is very comfortable with this and with the offsets and the trade-offs that they're considering. That's the reason why I supported the motion moving forward. Thank you, Mayor. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Richie. And we'll go to John Roberts. John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Terry, can I ask you a question? Do you have any problems with us dropping the size of the easement on this from 50 feet to 37.5 feet?
Terry?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, when we review these, we review them based on our design standards that have been developed over time and over the years, you know, well accepted. And that's not to say that we don't approve exceptions. We do approve exceptions on a case-by-case basis, usually dependent on special circumstances in regard to whatever issue we're dealing with. I'll be honest with you, in this particular case, we just didn't see any special circumstances that would warrant the exception. So that's why, as a staff, at the staff level, we denied the request. And I think we stand by that. You know, I think that the standard for the 20-foot wide paving, I'm sure the fire department was one of the primary reasons we set that standard. You know, so obviously having the fire department on board with the narrower width certainly helps the applicant out, but I'm sure there's other reasons behind that criteria too. So I think from a staff standpoint, you know, we still stand behind our decision to deny the exception.
One question though, engineering wise, does it cause any problems dropping that easement down engineering wise?
I'd probably have more concern with dropping the easement width over the pavement width, to be honest with you, because now's the time to get the easement width. If you don't get it now, you have a very difficult time getting it in the future probably. You can always widen the pavement width out at a later date as more homes are added on, but that'd be my initial thought on it.
Thank you, Terry.
We'll go to Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Another question for Mr. Walterstorff, if I may. Currently, this driveway is a private easement. It's not a through street.
That's correct.
It's not a city street.
Correct.
Okay. How many parcels are serviced by that, not including the requested subdivision?
I believe there's 2 parcels that are serviced by it right now.
2 parcels and the number of homes?
2 homes.
2 homes. Okay. And how many are we allowed to have on accessible by a private easement?
Our design standards allow 4 homes serviced by a private easement.
Okay. May I ask a couple of questions of Mr. Voorhees, please, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Brent, if you would. Thank you for entertaining my questions. How many different property owners are there? Do you own all of the properties, or are there multiple owners?
I have a purchase option agreement right now through May 1st to get through this platting process. And currently right now there's one owner, Matt Benny, that owns the property that I'm looking at. And he also owns the property just to the south of that. So right now he owns both of the properties that the private roadway easement services.
Okay. Are the other homes sprinkled?
The other homes would not
Two
be,
existing homes?
no.
They are not.
They're probably 1960, 70 homes.
Okay. Are all property owners then on board with the fuels mitigation?
Yes, and at the Public Works comment, Sam Baney was here to say that he didn't have any issue with what we were trying to accomplish.
Now, listening to Mr. Walterstorff's comments, would you be agreeable to allocating the 50-foot easement right now if you weren't required to pave, if we would waive the requirement to pave?
I don't have that authority because I'm not the owner of
Mr. Benny
that.
here?
He is not.
Okay.
So, but in speaking to them, it was their preference that they wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, there's preference and then there's compromise. So do you have a feel on that one way or the other?
The discussion I had before we came to the Public Works Committee is that they're not interested in that easement being widened.
Okay. Well, I think it would be helpful for us to know the answer to that from Mr. Benny's mouth prior to making decision. I don't have any further questions. I will yield. Thank you for answering mine.
Thanks.
Thank you, Charity. We'll go to Amanda Scott. Amanda?
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask Terry a couple questions? Follow-up? Terry, just for clarification purposes, Alderwoman Doyle asked you how many parcels or how many homes could be serviced on a single easement, and you replied 4. But that is utilizing a 50-foot easement, not the current easement that's in place, correct?
That's correct.
And may I ask a question of Mike Multiburn, Chief Multiburn? Chief, and you're okay with fire suppression going into the new proposed house and not having the other 2 houses have fire suppression? You're comfortable that without widening this easement or creating a turnaround that you would still be able to satisfy the safety and fire concerns up there?
Thank you. That is correct, because this would be new construction or there'd be some type of a substantial remodel or renovation to newer buildings, then we would have the ability to go in and require the sprinkler protection. Those existing residences, it's not been our policy or practice to go in and require that retrofit of those existing buildings. So if there's an incident in one of those buildings that sits there now, we're equipped to deal with those. It's if these additional properties go on behind the ones that are already there, then of course that poses problems for us. So, and just to reiterate, these applicants have been very, very cooperative with us and are very in support of what we're proposing, and they've really embraced the idea. So it's a win-win for us for sure. So thank you.
And then Terry, just one other follow-up question then. For the fire suppression system, do you know if these parcels are on city water, or would there have to be additional flow tubes installed in order to meet the requirements for that fire suppression system installed in that house?
They are not on city water, nor are they planned to be on city water. I believe they'll be serviced by a private well. As far as the details on what kind of fire suppression system they're putting in, I don't know the details on that.
Does Chief Mike know?
Thank you. We obviously have a pretty active role in that. We'd go out and do some fire flows and some testing in the area to assure that any infrastructure they have in place today would support the fire suppression system. So it would likely not require any additional fire flows. That's one of the reasons we're proposing the residential fire sprinkler, is because there's not adequate fire flows in the area to support a large firefight. If we hooked onto hydrants in that system and had to stretch hose lines to those houses, we likely wouldn't have the water. A sprinkler system requires, literally you're talking about tens of gallons versus hundreds, if not thousands of gallons to fight a fire. Typically a fire will be suppressed in a residence by 1 or 2 sprinkler heads flowing about 15 gallons per minute. Our standards are that we would require literally hundreds, if not thousands, to fight a large fire. So the sprinkler system in the house is certainly a viable option in lieu of larger infrastructure. So.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Mayor's smiling at me. I'm not sure why, but
in a good mood tonight.
Because you look much better than the rest of us.
We'll go to Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my reason for supporting this, to prove it, is having been out in the area, out in the neighborhood. If you look at it, it's pretty normal with what's going on out there. It kind of fits in to not have to go and put a big street in, another paved area. So I don't think you're really altering the. I don't think you need to alter the area very much to do this. It still looks like it belongs when you do it this way. And with their agreements, and thank you for the chief for explaining how fire systems work, because you don't need huge dedicated lines. You can do the internal residential sprinkler systems that they have nowadays are designed to operate off of low pressures. So that works out well. And I just think that's a good way to keep this neighborhood looking essentially how it looks right now, and just give these folks a chance to move on with their lives. So thank you.
Ron Sasso.
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess I'm trying to, I'm going off my memory, and there's part of me that I almost want to play the video from Public Works. I guess I don't, from memory, I'm not recalling as much staff opposition to this from Dale Tech, I believe. I think, if I remember correctly, because that was a concern I had going into the meeting, looking at that, and it sounded like even though it was outside of our norm, it wasn't as big of a concern. And I know, unfortunately, Dale's not here on that, but Terry, I guess if you...
Yeah, if I could, Mayor, I think the right way to put this. There's all of our criteria they're good criteria. They were, like I said, developed over a number of years and have been adjusted and revised. And there are some that are probably more important as public works staff than other, as far as our departments are concerned. This particular criteria, I would envision was probably developed really with a lot of input from the fire department and emergency personnel standpoint. So when fire department personnel and staff at the meeting voiced their support of it, it certainly impacts how strongly we're going to be opposed and fight for our criteria, I guess. So again, we kind of fall back a little bit to what the fire department's stance was on it too.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, thanks.
Terry, I have a question for you. In thinking about past issues of how they're going to be shared service lines involved in this,
No, not shared service lines.
but you have you have a small easement, and someday if there's water nearby, and you want them to hook up to water, you're going to probably have shared lines, right? Like we've had on Franklin Street and Fairview and some of the other places in town.
They're going to have to, for instance, they are going to connect to our public sewer system. We're going to extend public sewer system down the easement so that they don't have service lines crossing other private properties. The same thing would happen with the water line. If we went to extend water line in the future and they needed to hook up, we would have to extend water main down this easement also. It's another good reason to get the easement in place now while you can.
But what I'm hearing is two different issues. The fire department is okay with the pavement width. Your concern as the public works director is with the width of the easement for future growth and hooking up these properties.
That's correct. I think now's the time to get the easement if you can.
One follow-up before I go back to Jerry Wright, and that would be, is there room back there, and this would be either to you or to Brett, for additional development? Beyond the 3 units?
Probably to the property to the south, I would say there would be. The larger tract, the 5R, I think it is, potentially could be developed and split down.
How large is the larger tract?
3.5 acres, I'm hearing.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Right. We'll go to Jerry Wright. Jerry?
I think with the discussion occurring, it's all the more reason that my motion be honored to go back to Public Works to answer some of these questions. Source of water, I understand, is a well. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, the fire suppression systems are normally operated by a gravity water system provided by the city, normally, correct? Don't have to be, but normally, yes?
I wouldn't say necessarily always gravity pressure, but
Throughout the city
and we
water
can
system.
certainly have adequate fire flows for a fire sprinkler system outside of municipal water sources. So many times a well, as long as the well can produce enough pressure, can support a residential fire sprinkler. So traditionally in Rapid City, most of the time it is on city water, but you're seeing a number of areas around the state that are relying on residential fire sprinklers in lieu of municipal water supply.
I'm just raising a caution flag that this is a well-provided water supply, and in a fire, sometimes power goes out and you lose your well, correct? So your sprinkler system doesn't work. I'm just saying that, it's an option, correct? But I'm more concerned also about the 12-foot drive. I think that's an extremely narrow width of pavement to expect to get emergency vehicles or any type of vehicle into when you need to. Bad things happen usually at night, snowstorms on payday. They don't happen in broad daylight, perfect weather. So you have to be prepared for that. But I think even more so, a couple of years ago, I believe we spent close to $1 million or thereabouts in that area putting a sewer system in. The intent of getting the people up there onto a sewer system to protect the water table. So I would assume that that project will ultimately go on. And if I remember right, our sewer service lines need to be either to a main, they can't be more than one service line combined, correct? That kind of thing. Which leads me to believe all the more reason that we need to have this easement, I would say preferably platted as a right-of-way, so we can put a service line into it, or a small main, so that the properties have individual service lines to that main. I think there's a lot of questions here that are not being resolved, and I'm not comfortable with the way it is. I've said that before, I just had to say it again. with more detail. Thank you.
And we'll go to our city attorney, Joel Landine. Joel?
Thank you, Mayor. I probably shouldn't interject myself into this discussion, but I was looking at Rapid Map. If you look at the property immediately north of the property in question, you see what this can look like down the road, and it looks like there was a dedicated right-of-way. There's now 6 properties, 6 lots taking access off that right-of-way off Cliff Drive that looks like it was once a driveway. It's now a dedicated right-of-way. It's almost like cul-de-sac, and there's 5 houses and 6 lots. So that's what the rules really meant to deal with and prevent, because down the road, if you continue to subdivide, that's what it's going to look like.
Thank you, Joel.
Chad Lewis.
Only as a point of clarification, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe the water that was extended out to that area was part of a one-time federal grant that we had to use money that was in an area that was not previously serviced.
Water or sewer?
The water and sewer, the work we did on Cliff Drive, that's south of this area, or north of
Would
this
have been
area.
sewer because water is all cistern, right?
Right.
Or
But
well?
but I'm saying that was a one-time federal grant that had to be used for money that was never, anyway, I'm just pointing out that we're not probably going up that hill unless we get a lot more money coming somewhere. I mean, as far as extending their services to that area, I don't see that coming in the near future. That was not Rapid City money that was used to do that. It was a federal grant, as I understand, from talking to the neighborhood. So just pointing that out.
Terry or Brett, for the benefit of the council, can you point out where the water and sewer is? The nearest water and sewer.
I believe this parcel will be served by sewer. It will not be served by water.
And how far away is the water?
I'd have to double check that.
Okay.
I don't have that information offhand, Mayor.
Okay. Ron Sasso?
Question for Brent Voorhees, please. Just wanted to, now you have until, was it May 1st, did you say?
Correct.
Okay. That's what I was curious about, because if we did opt to send this back to Public Works, this would delay you several weeks for getting a final answer, and would you still be able to work with that?
Not 100% sure. I mean, if it gets denied, then, that's what the time was allotted for me for basically 6 months. So it's been getting through the process with the engineer and putting a layout plan together, and Public Works meeting last week, and now the council meeting today. So really on your guys' schedule.
If it was to go back to Public Works, it would be going back next week and then coming back to City Council the following week. So if I'm correct on that.
So my understanding is that this needs to come through the Planning Commission, Brett, before it's ultimately approved. I mean, the rest of this property.
Yeah, the preliminary plan does.
Okay. So do we have the authority to approve this contingent on Planning Commission approval and council approval of the rest, or do we have to do a yes or no before that can proceed? I guess that question will go to our city attorney.
I apologize. What's the question?
What I'm asking is if we can do contingent approval, if we can approve this, and then it would expire if the Planning Commission or the council says no to the preliminary plating. That way, this wouldn't stay with the property, and it would expire because the rest of the development didn't go anywhere. Do we have that authority?
I would want to look at that some more. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, because if it was a stipulation granted for a specific request and that didn't come to fruition, I would think that you could say that if this doesn't proceed the way it's been proposed, then this goes away.
So could we do this, and this is something that we don't do very often under our parliamentary procedures, but we can, is approve this tonight, and then an alderman offers what's called a motion of intent to reconsider, which brings it back. And then if the next phase isn't approved, then then this can come back and be heard again. Do we have that ability to do that on this type of a situation?
Well, now you're getting really complicated. So, I would say prove it contingent on, or continue it to the Public Works, and we can look at proving it contingent at the next meeting, and they could proceed with their other applications, and with the understanding, they've got to get it all approved for this to move forward.
Okay. We're going to go to Amanda. Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. May I follow up a question that you had started to propose to Brett Limbaugh? Brett, if this has still got to go through the planning phase, will the planning phase consider the 50-foot easement?
Yeah, let's take a look at how the process used to work. They would come in, they'd get a variance to a development regulation, and then they would go on to platting. Well, this is the same process. It's just that, let's say 19 out of 20 of these are now approved administratively. This happens to be one of the 20 that we didn't approve administratively, so it's back in front of you, just like the variances used to be. So you need to really take a very close look at this, make sure it's something you want to do, and then we can plat accordingly.
So if we were to approve it tonight, then when it comes to being platted or subdivided, you would take the council's recommendation today into consideration and probably work with doing something less than that 50-foot easement?
Yeah, it'd be just like approving variance to the old subdivision regulations. If you approve it tonight, then that's the way we plat it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to support Jerry Wright on this and just send it back to Public Works. I really don't think 2 weeks is going to matter, and I'd rather have a lot more information before you. The other choice is we may deny it tonight, and then you're done. So I'd rather see it continue for another 2 weeks and at least give you another shot of clearing up the answers. Thank you.
And we'll go to Jerry Wright.
Thank you. I think it's a wise decision to send it back and look at it, and I hope that the engineering firm involved and owners will listen to the tape and our concerns, and I think they can be resolved, and we'll get an engineered design solution versus taking a hypothetical, theoretical gift in the bag that we don't know what's coming down the track. So I think send her back and let it come back to us in black and white the way it should be. Thank you.
The motion on the floor is to approve. Is that correct? Substitute motion is to approve. Any further discussion on the substitute motion to approve? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Here. Okay, motion fails with one aye. Is that correct? All right. All right. We are now back to the original motion, which was to continue to the next Public Works meeting, which is what date? Do we know the date of next week's? Is it next week? March 12th? Any discussion on the motion to continue to March 12th? Please
Yes,
keep your
yes.
discussion to the continuation motion. Jerry?
Send it back, but it isn't just to continue it. I want resolution from Public Works on the issues. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion to continue the March 12 Public Works meeting? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion carries with one no, and this item has been continued to next week's Public Works meeting. We'll now go to item number 32. Jerry. The floor has been yielded, and we'll go to Richie Nordstrom. We do not have a motion. It would be nice if you made one. And then you can hold the floor.
Let me make let's see if I can make the motion here is to authorize the mayor, this is my motion, is authorize the mayor and staff to prepare changes to the TIF guidelines and report back to the March 26th Public Works Committee meeting. That'll be my motion.
Do we have a second? Well, Richie offered a motion to do what item 32 says. So we have a second by Roberts. Richie, you have the floor.
I appreciate the enthusiastic second there, Alderman Roberts, because I just wanted to be clear on what you were asking for, Alderman Roberts, about what you were requesting at the Public Works Committee to bring up this guideline because at that point I was thoroughly confused to what you were trying to attempt, and I give you that opportunity to clarify that now.
Thank you, Councilman Nordstrom. I guess what I was trying to clarify was the fact that we didn't have enough information, in my opinion, on last Tuesday morning to make a opinion one way or another to send that TIF to the Planning Commission. I think that, and I asked Brett, wake up, Brett, okay. I think you got all the information that I asked you to look at for the going forward on the TIFs, because we need more information to make an informed decision, Richie. I mean, one of the checks on the TIF guidelines is whether or not the person bringing forward the TIF can do this with or without, can do this project with or without the TIF itself. We had no numbers. We have no idea how many lots are going to be within that TIF. We have no idea how much is going to be commercial. We have no idea how much is going to be residential. We have no idea. When we have when we know nothing that's coming forward in that TID or that TIF, how can we really make a decision whether or not they can do it with or without the TIF? So I think I was fairly clear. I'm sorry that I didn't bring everything. Maybe Brett can clarify it for you.
If that's all right with Mayor, yes, I would like a little bit of input from Brett.
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I think the discussion was when you bring these TIFs forward, especially if you're looking at development on the periphery and what we would call greenfield development, the question always comes up, if you approve the TID or if you don't approve the TID, would this development happen anyways? And the only way you can know that is to have the developer break down the costs of this is what it would cost to extend the water, sewer services, other utilities, roadway infrastructure, and so forth, and this is what a normal development or developer would pay. When it comes to oversizing those improvements, because the city wants you to oversize them, that's a little bit different. And then you're getting into some extraordinary costs that the developer is inheriting, and that's really what a TID would be for, or at least a development incentive would be for. I'm not sure a TID is appropriate on greenfields, but nevertheless, that's what we're using. But I think that's the breakdown that you want. What would a developer normally pay for to develop, and what are the extraordinary costs? What is that split? So if that's the clarification you wanted, we'll take that on.
And that is exactly what I wanted, Brett. Thank you very much. You're a lot clearer than I can be. Did you understand that, Richie?
Yeah, I'm getting it, what you're after. Mayor, if I just may do a follow-up. Brett, essentially what we were doing at this meeting on that Tuesday morning was just establishing a TID, though. Isn't that different from what Alderman Roberts is asking?
Yeah, we were looking at establishing kind of the area that was being affected, but not the actual financial mechanisms.
So as far as what Alderman Roberts is looking for on a TIF, that's different, and he's looking for information about how much is residential, how much is commercial, et cetera. That's in a different format, though, isn't it?
You know,
I mean, yes, it can be part of this, but normally it's in a different format, correct?
Yeah, and you know that's the kind of options I think we need to bring to you, is what do you want to see if you're on that committee in order to make that decision, rather than just looking at what area are we approving. You want to break down of the infrastructure costs. You want a breakdown of what's going to be developed. You know, we can take a look at a number of those things. We're not just going to bring you one item or one option, but we'll bring you a number of things to consider.
Okay, I'll go along with that. That sounds amenable. So let's at least have the opportunity to take a look at those.
Thank you, Richie. And if I could add to that, I think one of the things that's important here is when the checklist is put up on the screen in front of the TIF committee, that the elements of those that checklist be able to be backed up. And one of the items that several committee members, including John Roberts, expressed concern about was the low-income affordable housing component, which I know is an issue that's near and dear to you, and that answer wasn't available. And it seems that a good committee should be able to, or good rules for a good committee should require that information to be available so that the committee can make a sound decision. And the committee felt like they were forced into a yes or a no and didn't have enough information for either one. So then they sent it down the road to the Planning Commission, and that really isn't fair to the Planning Commission, to the applicant, or to the TIF committee. So, John, did I accurately reflect some of the discussion? Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Everyone understands the motion is to approve item 32 and draft some changes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We are now on item number 36 on legal and finance. This is to acknowledge the December 2012 sales tax report. Amanda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to bring up and just review, because we were all kind of waiting for the final sales tax for December of 2012 to come in. The year started out with sales tax coming in really well. If everyone remembers the weather conditions for the beginning of 2012, actually the first half of the year last year was really good. Construction was strong. And I think a lot of that had to do with the contributions to the sales tax. People were out and about shopping. The weather was nice. And it really raised hopes in the city. And March of 2012, the sales tax percentage rate over 2011 was over 10%. The sad part is that starting in May, it hit 9.54, and from there on out, it declined every single month. And we ended the year at 5.25, which means that we missed the pre-slotted increase for the city employees to get a 2.5% increase, and instead they'll just get a 1.25% increase in July. So wanted to caution everybody about this, because I think some people out in Rapid City are already anticipating huge sales tax increases in 2013, and I just want to caution everybody that if it starts out at the first half of the year, we can have a dismal second half that comes in that can take us down again. So thank you.
We have a motion to acknowledge by Doyle and a second by Nordstrom. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 37.
37 is to acknowledge the January 2013 General Fund Cash Report, and I make a motion to approve and would like to retain the floor.
Do we have a second? We have a second by Laurenti, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Pauline, I know that I posed a Mayor, if I may ask Pauline a question. I posed a question to you, Pauline, and you explain this stuff so much better than I do. I noticed when I pulled up the fund cash report, it looks like all of a sudden the city got rid of all of its bills. And then it goes into March, and it looks like the city is in the hole. So could you please explain why that's set up that way?
First of all, at the end of 2012, any cash that was designated to be used actually goes back into the undesignated balance, because at that time the budget is done. We can take no more expenses out of that budget or cash out of the bank. So then when you come over to 2013, especially in January, the amount in the designated column for January of 2013 is that which was part of the budgeting process to help balance our general fund budget. When we approved the budget for 2013, we said our revenues are going to be $555,865 less than our expenditures, so we are going to use undesignated cash for that purpose. So that's why there's in January. Well, if you recall, in February we approved a supplemental appropriation, and part of the funding source on that was additional $2.7 million of undesignated cash to pay bills brought forward from 2012. And that ordinance is not effective, though, until March. And so you will not see that show up in the designated amount until March, because of the fact that all of our ordinances are referable, and until that 20-day time period lapses, it is not set.
And thank you, Pauline. See, you explained it much better than I could have. So basically, if you're looking at the budgeting, if anybody's following it out there, look at March, because we still do have to pay those bills. They're just pulled up to the 2013 budget. Thank you, Pauline. I yield the floor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're now on non-consent items 45 through 61. Do we have a motion to open public comment? Motion by Doyle, second by Lewis. All in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We'll go to John Herr, who would like to speak on item 48. Okay, very good. John has yielded. We'll go to Dick Johnson from West River Electric on item 54. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'll just make a quick opening comment, I guess, and then sit back down to let you ask any questions. I am Dick Johnson, CEO and General Manager of West River Electric, and I actually printed out my comments so I wouldn't get too out of line here and get to wandering on stuff that I didn't need to. But as a quick background on this revenue sharing agreement, gross receipts tax is set in state law, as you've been made aware of, and it applies only to the cooperatives that are minority power suppliers within the city limits of a city, such as Rapid, or municipal systems. From what I know, the law was put in place years ago when the personal property tax was taken out back in the 70s. They had to have a way to garner revenue, from what I'm understanding, and that's where they put this gross revenue tax in order to garner some additional revenue. The majority power supplier, which in this case is Black Hills Power, they're assessed by the Department of Revenue and Pier, each, I think, by July 1st, based on their poles, wires, transformers, all that sort of stuff, and then that assessment is sent down to the county level, and they assess it just like you would a piece of real estate or a building. In our case, we're not centrally assessed, so to get that revenue, they go with the gross receipts tax. One of the things we'd done as an estimate of what our plan is within the city limits there on the east side of Rapid, we figured about $11 million, 11 to 11.5, and figured on the mill levy that's currently there, it'd be about a $35,000 to $38,000 tax that we would pay if we were centrally assessed. Instead, for this year, with the 1% gross receipts we currently have in place, it's going to be about $90,000, so it's over double of what it is. So it's quite a bit of difference. The law was changed in 2005. At that time, it was a standard 2%. It was flat, given in state law. That's what you paid. That's the way it was. I found out today from our one of our longtime lobbyists, and he was a manager at a co-op. He said the reason it was changed in 2005 to make it negotiable between 0 and 2% was because there was a turkey processing plant coming into Huron. And his understanding at the time, he said, was that they were going to be on co-op lines in the city of Huron, and that 2% was going to make a big difference because they'd be a huge user. So they made it a negotiable item so that they could negotiate it down to 0%, is what I understood. So then what we did, West River at that time, after that, came back in 2008 and worked with the council and mayor at that time and negotiated it down to 1%, because we thought at that time it was about fair with what our assessed valuation would be versus what our gross revenue tax would be. So all we want to do tonight is just continue that agreement. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking for a cut or anything like that. We're just asking for a continuation of the agreement. We're hoping we don't go increase it, but we sure aren't asking for any decrease, even though there is still probably some disparity there and maybe not as fair as it could be for everybody. We do still, one of the questions I had was, what other taxes do you pay? We still pay property tax out on our building and grounds that we have, the Valley substation sites, that sort of stuff. We still pay just like anybody else or any other business would be. And I think for this year it's about $28,000 with the new building. So it's pretty, we pay our fair share there. We also, pay sales and use tax, but that's just, flow through to our members. So that's the way that works. One question I thought I would address is why, a couple things. One of them was why, if we're the majority power supplier, like in Box Elder, New Underwood, Wall, those types of places, how come we don't have to pay a gross receipts or something to them? That I can't tell you. I asked our lobbyist today, and he was kind of the same way. I gave the answer was they must have had a good lobbyist back then that apparently either the small towns didn't get it or what the deal was, we don't know. But we're not required to pay the other towns in our area that we serve. We don't have to pay them any gross receipts and no any type of tax other than property tax. Like in the city of Wall, we have our office headquarters is there. We pay property tax and that sort of stuff. Same way out in the country in our substation sites, that type of thing. One other question I'd asked or was asked in the committee meeting the other day was we were asking for 2015. Why that length of time? We really, I think when we originally started, as I recall, in 2018, or in 2008, excuse me, we wanted a longer-term agreement. I believe the city attorney at that time said we couldn't do that. It had to be a year-by-year deal, and we had, or year-by-year agreement, and we had to have a certain amount of time, I think, for budgeting purposes. So we've tried to extend it as far as we can, which is 15, which helps us for planning purposes. So all we're asking for tonight is just a renewal of the agreement that exists and go on from there. And that's all I would have, I guess, until the agenda item comes up.
Thank you. We'll now go to Jackie Gallego on item 55. Good evening, Jackie.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jackie Gallego, and I came in this last week and I visited with the finance portion of the council and made a presentation to get the minutes or part of the minutes from the council for the Native American readership in our newspaper, the Native Sun News. And feel that this is very strong builder to build that growth of our education to the Native Americans that are living here in Rapid City. In the conversation we've been having, we are going to be getting the ballots for the mayor's races and different things that are happening. So being that it's in our paper, the Native American readers, which is their reader of choice paper, they can find out what is happening in their community to help them either vote or know more about what's happening in the community that affects them, education-wise, homeowners, water rights, easements, etc. And we feel that this is something that's needed and would like to see you guys be able to work with us to do that. Any questions?
We'll come to that item in a moment, Jackie, and then there'll be an opportunity for the council to ask you questions.
All right.
And next, on item 56, we'll go to Terry Nelson. Item 56.
Good evening. I'm Terry Nelson. I own the property on 611 Main, or the Stretch Studio behind Art Alley. And I really want to thank the mayor, and I also want to thank each one of the council members tonight just for a short period of your time to discuss Art Alley. I don't know if you realize it or not, we're here to discuss Art Alley, but it's a lot bigger than Art Alley. If you go around, walk around town, actually graffiti is touched on every direction of Art Alley. You can walk north, south, east, or west, and there's graffiti on every part of that. Also, if you look up, right now, tonight, there's graffiti, for example, on Alex Johnson, on the Buell Building, and then just Friday, the firehouse, and I just happened to be walking back from the City Hall, and on the bell tower, there's brand new graffiti on there. So I'm saying to you on that, why am I concerned about graffiti? Usually with graffiti, you get crime, and you've seen it. I mean, you've heard some about Art Alley and the whole thing in terms of some crime. We've got a wonderful downtown, and we want to make sure that it stays that way. One of the things I think the business owners, I think the mayor received a letter from 25 business owners indicating that they were concerned about Art Alley. And just the Art Alley just happened, folks. I don't know if you realize it or not. There was no approval on the buildings to be painted on. I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but there wasn't. It just happened. And initially when it first happened, I must admit I was quite impressed. The art was very good. I'd even visualized possibilities that they might have a situation where you'd have the front door and back door and people would come in. Well, it's gone downhill a long ways on that. And I really think, and I just appreciate so much each one of you for the possibility of discussing a task force to take a look at it. And who should be on the task force? Certainly business owners, property owners big time. And I think also probably your state, city attorney or city attorney offices take a look at the ordinances. And I don't think it's a situation where we want to do away with Art Alley. It's a situation that we just want to have some input between the property owners and let's say the artist. You understand? It just happened. And right now, it's just happening, and no one really gets interested in it. It's sort of interesting. You know, in this city, we've got a fantastic police department, and they do a very, very good job, but I sometimes think they get confused as to what should be enforced and what shouldn't be enforced, because it just happened, Art Alley. It wasn't anybody's fault. It wasn't any situation like that. It was interesting. I went to the Dahl Art Center, it was last week, and the artists talked. And there were a lot of, they gave a very good program in art, very good program. I know some of the city council members are here. And they talked, and they were talking some about, you know, free art, free expression, and whatever, and that. And it's interesting, I know a couple of the mothers got up and they said, we need art alleys so we can get a graffiti going and the whole thing, and my child wants to paint and whatever. I don't know if the city ever thought about it or not, but maybe we should develop a wall for graffiti. A wall, or maybe even the Dahl Fine Arts Center should have a wall, so you can write on, do graffiti on the outside of a wall. I'm not sure. But just the aspect of being able to talk about it, I guess I look for on a task force where the business owners and a number of things. Another one, all those buildings in Art Alley pretty much are historical preservation. Don't destroy the buildings. We could have a situation where it could be lit up more, the art could be spotlighted, and it can work between the business owners and the artists. It can. But please let us work together to set up a task force to explore that instead of just letting it go laissez-faire or whatever. Because I know some of the business owners have been threatened or painted over, or when they set up a sign, no painting on that. It can be worked out. Let's work and make Art Alley even better. So thank you very much, Mayor and the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And now we'll go to James Taylor, also on item 56. Mr. Taylor.
I'm James Taylor, and I have the building at 612 St. Joseph Street, where our, again, Books is. I like to look, and I think that everyone in this council are acute business people. And if I was looking at this alley, what would I insure it for? What would be, how much would it cost me to insure it? And what would I insure it for? Now, if you take this possibility that there's two incidents in Art Alley, two major incidents in Art Alley close together, with it being graffiti in there, we could see the business going down in that area 5 or 10% for a period of 30, 45 days. This is the possibility. Now, what would it cost me to insure that alley? Would you insure it if you were an insurance company against $1 million worth of losses of businesses around the area? It'd be a very big question. So there's problems with that. So it's an important aspect to downtown for that alley to be safe. Now, that alley doesn't have even the same lighting as the alley behind the Main Street Square. It has a lot more traffic, I can tell you that. And it's tourist traffic. People are interested in this. People come from miles around just to see Art Alley. So it is a tourist attraction. Now, all of these points that he made, where kids are climbing on roofs, there's vandalism, there's drunks there, that's all happening. There's lots of things happening, and we certainly need a task force. Now, there was the possibility that we talked about of an artist guild, and with a task force, maybe we could get some people like the Bid Board and Destination Rapid City, and possibly Summer Nights, to support volunteers that are in that alley a lot more to take care of and have a new possibilities of having new methods of regulating the alley. There are some problems that the city will have to address. The lighting, cameras. Lighting and cameras are absolutely a must in that alley from my point of view, and I think from many other people's. But here's the flip side of this. The flip side of this is that we can have a vision, if we get a task force, we can have a vision for that alley that takes all of these points, places in the days that downtown are dead, from 6 o'clock tonight to 10 o'clock tonight, to have different things happening in that alleys. From Sundays, have different things happening there that can get out downtown going in those times. So what I'm asking for is the same as that other gentleman asked for, and I think that all of you know it, that we need a task force that approaches these problems. But I do think that they can be solved, and that we can have. There is a vision that we can come up, and that could be a really positive aspect for downtown Rapid City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And now we'll go to Michael Galanda, also on item 56 on Art Alley.
Michael Galanda. I'm very much in support of this task force. As you know, Sam, I put in early to be one of the people on it. This past weekend, I have been shooting with my little camera, as a joke as it is funny there, and it's a very big product. We have kids that say that they've been in all their lives, and they know there's problems. They don't want to lose it. They want to fix it. I have pictures on my IGM Pro Facebook page that have been picked up from places in London, England, on the new artwork. There's people that see this around the world. There's a guy from Montana that said he come here and he has never seen it, and he stopped to visit just because of the colors on the wall. So I'm very much think that this is a needed task force. We have a money maker. People come all over the world to see it. People go all over the internet to see it. They go over the Art Alley pages, and you have a chance to make a lot of money. And I'm saying we need a task force. It can be fixed. If Main Street Square is drawing people, this can too. I'm in favor of this task force to fix it, because a lot of people don't want to lose it.
Thank you, Michael. And now we'll go to Pepper Massey, also on item 56. Pepper?
Good evening. This is Tyler Reed. He's one of our co-educators of direction at the Dahl Art Center. Tyler's got a bit of a PowerPoint. Can we... If we could get this set up. We had the opportunity to have a panel discussion at the Dahl Art Center last week. And what we felt that was the first step in this process for the Rapid City Arts Council. And we're trying to determine where we need to go next. There's a lot of information out there that needs to be gathered from people that own buildings, people that own businesses on Main Street, the artists. We were able to gather some information from that meeting that gave us a direction to go to. We feel that a couple of more meetings are in order. All right. So one of the first things that we did from the meeting is we were able to identify some of the challenges that people on Main Street are facing. The building owners were clear. They felt in the way that it was described to me that they had been disrespected. It was clear. People weren't communicating with them. At the beginning, the artists would go up to the building owners, and they had a relationship with them, and they were able to speak to them, and all of a sudden that relationship has deteriorated. And I think some of that can be repaired. We are hopeful that we can have a a meeting with the business owners and sit down and talk to them and get a little more clear on what some of those concerns are. But it was really important to get that they wanted an opt-out option. If they didn't want art on their building, they wanted to be able to say, this isn't what I want. We also understood loud and clear from the business owners that they needed to decrease some of the vandalism, and the artists also said that they wanted to see a decrease in the vandalism on the art. Some of the other challenges that were clear from that meeting, people were accessing the rooftops, there were people that were drunk in the alleys, there was criminal activity, vandalism, and property damage. There were some safety concerns and some signage. Did you want to speak to the safety concerns and signage issues, Tyler?
As far as the safety issues, I think that it being an alley where people are welcomed and invited in, it is still an alley, and so some people have some hesitation about that. Another thing that brings some of the safety concerns, I think, is some of the intoxication issues. Not necessarily art-related, but the intoxication issues. As an artist who's spent a lot of time there, I know that it can be a little bit unnerving when people come up and start talking to you, and it's obvious that is a situation. Yeah.
Okay, next slide. So we have an action plan. We're planning to schedule 2 meetings, one with the building owners and businesses in that downtown corridor that backs into Art Alley, and listen to all of them, give them an opportunity to share what they feel their concerns were. There were some business owners that were represented in our panel, but we would like all of them to sit around and really hash this out and share as much as they can about what their concerns are and what some of those solutions would be. We'd be interested in working with the police department when it is reasonable on some of the safety issues, and we also want to have a meeting with the artists, get them in a room and talk about some things as well, listen to their concerns and some solutions that they have. And this would hopefully result in something that was discussed at the forum, an Art Alley Artists Guild that would support all of the stakeholders, including building owners, the business owners, as well as the artists and the community.
Pepper?
Yes.
If you don't mind, since we have other people waiting for votes on their items, would you be okay with continuing this presentation when we get to item 56, and then we'll give you the time at that time to finish your presentation and answer council member questions?
Absolutely. I thought I was at the right place. So sorry.
And you are, but we want to give you the time to finish your presentation, and I think it might be better if we can do that when we can do the give and take.
Sure.
And the questions with the council. So
We'd be happy to do that. Thanks.
And now we'll go to item number 57, Julie Fry. Good evening, Julie.
I am Julie Fry from Roger Fry's Paint and Supply. Thank you for hearing my little issue again. I did not know, as I said the very first time, that asking a meter maid not to ticket a vehicle backed up to our sidewalk, I didn't know it would entail a few meetings. Thank you for the 3 of you, Jerry Wright, Ron Sasso, and Richie Nordstrom, for coming to the store and actually looking at our little dilemma. We were very grateful. We received a parking unloading zone, I think back in November, I'm not quite sure, when we had addressed the issue that we needed a spot for customers to be able to come in and just grab stuff and go, because with the building next door that's all rented out and the School of Mines students there, the parking is even more difficult in front of our store. And when Richie Nordstrom was there, he noticed how they park there in our loading and unloading zone. We did call the officers twice that day. We did bother the officers twice that day because they don't pay any attention that they're not supposed to park there. So we really don't have a loading and unloading zone because it's, and I don't know, Ron, if you noticed that as well there. So I guess Jerry Wright had considered or came up with the idea of possibly taking a double spot in the middle of the block and putting big signs there and painting the curb and making that a more noticeable, if I'm correct, loading, unloading zone so that people do not mistake it for a parking spot. I think I misspoke the very first time I said something about sometimes we have 700 cases to take out. I meant 700 maybe square feet, or, you know, you can have 50 to 70 cases at a time that you might take out, or big rolls of carpet. We do need a more convenient spot. We did have that before, which I had taken you guys around the store and showed you. When we had rented the adjacent buildings, we had 2 different docks which we could load and unload from, and big flooring items. But we don't have that any longer since Henny Shaffey has, you know, redone the building and rented it to different places. We only have our one dock in the back, and a lot of paint contractors use that one, and that's now where we store a lot of paint, so we don't have room to store the flooring things anywhere but in the front of the store. So that's where we load and unload for those kind of larger items. And so if I know I've talked to you guys a few times. If you have any questions, I'll wait around for a little bit, but whatever you can do to help us out, that would be great. And again, my first thing was just not ticket people backed up. And another thing I would like to say is, if this is an ordinance that, you know what, like I said, we'd been downtown 30 years and I'd never heard of anything like that. As long as you were in your spot, you know, I didn't know it was against the law. Anyway, but if you could, obviously just not ticketing somebody was not an option, but then it needs to probably be posted everywhere. Just a little thought. But thank you.
Thank you, Julie. We do not have any additional speaker request forms for items 45 through 61. Did I miss anyone? Do we have a motion to close public comment? We have a motion by Roberts and a second by Nordstrom. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item 45, Amanda?
Second reading, ordinance number 5913, an ordinance repealing Chapter 1.08 of the Rapid City Municipal Code relating to wards and precincts, and adopting a new revised Chapter 1.08 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Amanda Scott and a second by Jerry Wright. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 46.
Second reading, ordinance number 5910, an ordinance to define transient guests for the purposes of occupational tax levied on hotel rooms in Business Improvement District Number 1, also known as the hotel bid, by amending Section 3.24.040 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Scott, second by Roberts. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 47.
First reading, ordinance number 5914, ordinance amending provisions concerning tax increment financing district review process found in Chapter 3.26 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Scott and a second by Wright for approval. And we'll go to Richie Nordstrom. Richie?
Mayor, thank you. As you know, I'm very lukewarm to this process change to it, but I am going to support it. The reasons why I am lukewarm is because of the comments made by the county commissioner, and I'm glad that you were able to do what I call play nice with the county commission as far as them making a bill in front of the state legislature on 1229, trying to do some changes on their side of the equation so that they could come up with some more money out of the TIFs. And that would take away or destroy the heart of the TIFs, and so that the money going towards the payment of the loans would be reduced. And I fully support that the developers are trying to get their loans paid off quickly, and they have been in history doing that. One of the things that was asked at the last Legal and Finance Committee meeting was that Chad Lewis asked the county commissioner about the, if I heard the question correctly, that Chad was asking that if there was a committee that they did put together TIFs on, and he replied that they did not do that. But I found out later on, and I'm not sure exactly how their commission works on this, but they did do 3 TIFs out there beyond the last 2 years, and that is in the recent time they've done a Doyle Estes drainage. They did another TIF out there with near the Sally O'Malley area. And most interesting one that I've come across is the Prairie Fire TIF that they put together. The city was involved in installing a sewer line out there, and Mr. Walstorf, you may have to correct me on this one here, but there was some water line being addressed in that area. And again, Mayor, I applaud you for trying to play nice with the county commission, and that's why I'm very supportive of your efforts to make some kind of an appeasement with the county, and so that we can do some cooperative thing. But I'm still concerned that we're still going to wind up with just guaranteed 2 no votes on the committee level. So if I may address a question to Terry on Prairie Fire TIF. Thank you, Terry. Could you explain that document that I was looking at has got to be a couple inches thick on that TIF for Prairie Fire. But can you just explain the city's portion of that sewer or water line that was installed out there?
Prairie Fire, and sometimes it's commonly known as, I think, Terracotta. It's out just south of the Green Valley area, just to the west of our water reclamation plant. So it kind of gives you an idea of where it is. And I don't know all the details of the county TIF that was done out there. I do know that there was some extension of our city sewer main out there to serve that area. So those homes out in that Prairie Fire area are served by city sewer. They privately own their sewer mains right now, and then they discharge into our city-owned sewers. They have a private water system out there that they have some problems with and would very much be interested in connecting to city water. We currently don't have water out in the area, but that's one of the projects we're working on with the $22 million utility support fund bond that was approved last summer. So we hope in the next 18 months we'll have water out in that area to serve not only the water reclamation plant, but this particular development also.
Correct. And then if I may ask Chad Lewis a question. Chad, you brought up a point at the Legal and Finance Committee of asking them for their input onto if they had a commission or a committee or something along that vein. I think it was what your question was, that they had a TIF committee.
I just believe my question was, does the county have a standing TIF committee?
Correct, and they don't. I just wanted to update you on that. But I believe what it is that it's the entire county commission that develops that. So again, I'm just kind of lukewarm on this whole process, but I applaud the mayor for trying to come together and work with the county on this, and hopefully we can educate them so that it isn't quite what they think it is what a TIF is, or the negatives that are associated, what they perceived as negatives about a TIF. So thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your effort on that.
Richie, Ron Sasso.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a change that I support. I know looking at this, on the one hand, it I think, as Richie points out, the concerns that might have automatically 2 no votes on a committee, and what I think instead is it makes the proposal for a TIF has to be strong. And I think a TIF can be a good tool for development. I know we've seen it used the right way, and I think in the past there have been some times where there have been some questionable TIFs, and I think those that are questionable will probably meet with a lot of opposition, as they should. But I think with positive TIFs, that when they see that the projections are going to be in the benefit of the county in the long run, I believe that anybody would support those. So I guess we'll see, but I will be supporting this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We'll go to Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I cannot support this. I appreciate your efforts to placate the county and make them feel more involved in the process. However, until they actually learn how TIFs work and understand them, I cannot publicly support them. I think they need to understand that TIFs do not affect their budget. They've got to learn that quickly. It's a pass-through, and I just think that we are doing a major disservice by making it look like TIFs are somehow bad by placating this, and I just will not do it. So I think we need to educate a little more, but I think that's just a bad idea, and I think I have a problem with the term lengths too. I think in the interest of continuity of the committee, I think we should have longer term lengths as well. So thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? The motion is to approve first reading, and we'll go to Amanda Scott. Amanda?
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification purposes, Mayor, I'm going to ask you a question so that you can clarify the term limits. The term in here is, or that's being thrown around, is term limits. There's actually no limit to the person serving on a TIF committee. It's just that they're reconfirmed every year. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. Let's briefly run through that. Right now, we have 4 mayoral appointments on the TIF committee, 2 council members and 2 planning commissioners. We have 1 member of the economic development team, which essentially is a city appointment, but it's appointed by the economic development board, which, by the way, the mayor has a seat on that board. And then the two remaining appointments are a member of the county commission appointed by the county commission, and a member of the school board appointed by the school board. And what we're proposing, what this ordinance does, is it takes 1 appointment away from the city and gives it to the county, and then it takes 2 appointments away from the mayor. This is at my request, by the way, and gives it to council leadership, because I believe out of principle that when you appoint a council member to a committee, to a standing committee that's established by ordinance or resolution, it should be handled similar to how the legislature does it, where the legislature selects their own to serve on that committee. And so basically what this means is the mayor will now have 1 appointment of a planning commissioner confirmed by the council, which is somewhat redundant because planning commissioners are already confirmed by the council, but it's in the ordinance, and we can just leave it there. The second 2 appointments would be council members appointed by the city council and confirmed by the council, and it's the same language that it was lifted right out of the Compass ordinance. And then 2 county appointments confirmed by the county, and then the economic development and the school board seat. So there's really 1 fundamental change as it affects the county, but there is a fundamental change as it affects the internal city appointments. And the language of the ordinance needed to be cleaned up because it said the term will be unlimited. Well, by virtue of the people who serve, all mostly being elected officials, it needs to be an annual appointment. Did I answer your question?
Yes, Mayor. Just wanted the clarification that if I were to serve on the TIF committee for 1 year and then my 2nd year of my term, if I wanted to serve again, I'm not barred from serving.
Not at all.
As long as I get the majority vote of the council.
It would be similar to many of the other council appointments that are already made on an annual basis in July and August.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Any further discussion on item 47? We'll go to John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There has been some discussion through the Planning Commission about this. I know they're not very happy about losing one of their appointees on here, but I will have to disagree with Mr. Lewis. I think it is a good idea to bring 1 more county commissioner on board. If nothing else, that way they get a little more knowledgeable about what is going on with TIFs instead of having 1 at a time. There was some concerns, too, about term limits, so I'm glad that was discussed and taken care of, because a lot of the people sitting on the TIF committee were concerned that 1 year wouldn't be long enough to learn, and especially how many TIFs have been coming forward in recent years. You could possibly be on the committee if it was term limited to 1 year and never see a TIF. So anyway, I'm glad that was clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And one more point of clarification is, here's how the process works. When the TIF committee approves or denies a TIF, it comes to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission approves or denies the TIF, and it comes to the City Council. So the Planning Commission is losing a voice at the very beginning of the process, but they're retaining their very important voice in the middle of the process. So in that sense, they're still made whole. Any further discussion on the motion? Richie?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification, it's an automatic that comes from the committee to the planning commission. It's an automatic, no matter which way it goes.
It's not
an
quite,
automatic.
if it's a denial, then it can be appealed to the
Has to be
planning
appealed.
commission. And if it's an approval, it automatically comes to the planning commission.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries and first reading is approved. Item 48.
First reading, ordinance 5911, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by a request by John Herr for GSA Incorporated for a rezoning from general commercial district to light industrial district for property located at 4503 and 4507 South I-190 or South I-90 Service Road. I make a motion to approve in conjunction with the associated comprehensive plan amendment request, which is item number 63.
We have a motion and we have a second by Wright. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 49.
First reading, ordinance 5912, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by a request by Tim Treithart of Community Health Center of the Black Hills for a rezoning from public district to office commercial district for property located at 725 East Philadelphia Street. I make a motion to approve in conjunction with the associated comprehensive plan amendment request, which should be item number 64.
We have a motion by Scott and a second by Roberts. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 50.
A request by Davis Engineering Incorporated for Donald and Carol Kobis for a preliminary subdivision plat for property located at 2615 Homestead Street. I approve with stipulations, or I make a motion to approve with stipulations.
And we have a second by Steve Laurenti. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 51.
A request by FMG Incorporated for the Lutheran Good Samaritan Society for a preliminary subdivision plat for property generally described as being located south of East Minnesota Street, east of Wisconsin Avenue, and west of Parkview Drive. I make a motion to approve with stipulations.
We have a motion and we have a second by Roberts to approve with stipulations. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 52.
A request by Renner and Associates, LLC, for Parkview Estate, LLC, for a preliminary subdivision plan for property generally described as being located east of Parkview Drive, south of Minnesota Street. I make a motion to approve with stipulations.
We have a motion and we have a second by Clayton. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 53, a request by Dream Design International Incorporated for a preliminary subdivision plan for property generally described as being located west of the current western terminus of Conservation Way, north of New England Street, and north of the current northern terminus of South Summerfield Drive. I make a motion to approve with stipulations.
We have a motion to approve with the second by Laurenti. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have had a request for a brief recess. If there's no objections, we'll take a brief recess and we'll be back at 8:30. No, charity request.
Joel cornered you.
We're going to reconvene shortly. If everyone could please take their seats. We will now reconvene the meeting, and we will move on with item number 54. Amanda, could you read item 54 into the record for us?
Mayor, I'm not sure, but I'll try. Item number 54, authorize mayor and finance officer to sign electric cooperative revenue agreement with West River Electric and Black Hills Cooperative Electric. And I will yield the floor.
Floor has been yielded. Do we have a motion to start off the discussion? We have a motion by Lewis and a second by Laurenti to approve. And this is with the 1%, right? That's what the current agreement currently says. Okay. And we'll go to Amanda Scott.
I know that Mr. Johnson is here from West River Electric. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to ask him some follow-up questions. Well, first of all, I wanted to let you know that I know you've been trying to find answers because we've been pestering you with questions, and I'm still trying to wade through the codified law on this, and I'm trying to understand why the city even has an agreement that we're looking 3 years out, or we're looking to the 2015 year right now. When I read the codified law, the way it's written that I read it, and I could be wrong, is that the city or the municipality and the cooperatives should be negotiating between 0, not paying anything, up to 2%, based on the gross receipts of the year that just got completed. That's what I read in the codified law. So do you know when this came about to negotiate with the city 2 years out, when we don't even know what the economy or the gross receipts or anything else are going to be?
That I guess I couldn't answer, to be candid. I do know we had to get the agreement in place well enough ahead of time for budgeting purposes, I believe, and maybe either the city attorney or Pauline could help us there as far as like 14, we'd have to have that in. I think we're a year ahead, to be quite candid. We'd have to have 14 approved by May 1st of this year in order to be able to get it into the budgeting and everything there. And what I think the past management has looked at trying to get an extra year just because it helps us in our planning and stuff like that. I don't see, as far as a reduction, the odds are very, very slim that that would happen. The only way it would be is if something catastrophic happened in our territory, or something big, but I don't see that happening. I hate to say it, I'm sure our rates aren't going to go down, so I'm sure we're going to have, even if we have steady rates, we'd at least have the same amount. So I guess I can't answer why we're, and how the law specifically looks at it. I've read it, I've got it with me, but to say that we've got to do past years, I guess I'm a little confused. We'd have to know, we'd have to make the agreement at the very minimum by May 1st of this year for 2014. We'd have to do that in order to be able to get it in your budgeting process or whatever. In fact, if I recall, I wasn't involved in the process, but as I recall, when we first did it, we came in too late, and we actually had to come back the next year to get it approved a year or two in advance, because otherwise we were too late. We came in maybe like in August or something like that, and it was too late to get into next year's cycle. So we had to wait a year in order to get into this cycle again. I don't know if that answered your question. I'd have to go to, I guess, a legal opinion on why it is, but I think that's just been kind of the way we have done it. And we don't have an amount. We're strictly estimating it. There's no doubt about that, but.
I also wanted to follow up with that, too. Yeah. And to follow up the question, thank you. Alderwoman Doyle was already showing me, we are talking about right now your request for 2015.
That's correct.
And that's
15.
where you were stating that you, the cooperatives, representing both of them, are actually coming to us a year in advance. Technically, we could put this off a year, because we really don't need to decide this for another year at the minimum. And based on codified law, we really wouldn't need to decide it until this same time period, 2016.
That I don't know if I would, that I would have to defer, I guess, and read closer in the law. That's not the way I understood it. I understood that we have to make an agreement for the next year, not one, I guess, trailing. It's more of a forward-looking agreement. That was my understanding. I would agree with you with a year. I would agree there that we probably are a year out, but we've just continued to do that. Once the agreement was set in 2008, we went ahead. It helps us in our planning to say we know it's going to be 1%. You know, as we do planning and budgeting also, it helps us, you know, is our main thing for trying to push it as far down the road as we can, because if we sit here now and we kind of do our planning for, you know, we do a 10-year financial forecast all the time. We can plug in 1%. Well, then all of a sudden, I mean, it's a in this case, if you decide to go to 2%, that's a $100,000 hit. That's pretty substantial to our, or 90,000. That's pretty substantial to our size of organization. So that's the concern that I have with, you know, trying to keep it as far ahead as we possibly can. What we'd really like to do would be to get a real long-term agreement, you know, even a 5 to 10-year one. But my understanding is we can't do that, and maybe it's due to the way the law is written or the city code. That I can't answer. I just remember that was our first intent, was to do that, and we weren't allowed to.
Well, just so everyone knows, and why I'm posing these questions is, I'm one of your customers.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you.
So I am a customer of West River Electric Association, but I've got my city hat on tonight, all right? So I'm working for the taxpayers when I'm posing these questions and stuff. And yes, I do pay my 2% sales tax because we're within the city limits of Rapid City, and that is a pass-through. So that's not West River Electric Association paying the sales tax. I am paying my 2% sales tax on the electricity I use through West River Electric Association. Since I get your weekly or your monthly newsletters, being a member, you write your monthly paragraph or your monthly letter very well, but I was picking some figures out of that. And so there was a tax rate that went into effect in 2011, and due to the increase in the tax rate to all of the West River Electric Association customers, even though there was a 2% reduction in kilowatt hours sold in 2012, you still had an 8% increase in overall revenue. So when you locked in a 1% sales tax on gross receipts back in 2011 for 2013, I'm sure you weren't projecting that even on your 10-year plan, because those are the variables that change. Yeah. So my concern is it probably is fair for the city and for the West River Electric Association customers. But at this time, we've really only had about 5 days to kind of review, and you're asking questions of your lobbyist, you're asking questions from your organization, we're plugging Pauline and our city attorney with questions on our side trying to understand this. Since we still have another whole year out, I'm really kind of hoping that one of my other colleagues up here will make a motion, substitute motion to put this out to maybe, you know, June 3rd, so that we can kind of review this and really look at it and understand it before we continue with an agreement. I am looking forward to the partnership, and like I said, I would just assume it was 0 because I'm a West River Electric Association customer, but with my city hat on, I'm not sure it shouldn't be 2% at this point. So I really think between the two of us, we really need to answer those questions. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope Alderman Scott was not DVRing anything tonight. So, Mr. Johnson, quick question for you. If your the current tax rate is what, is 1%, is that
Yep,
correct?
that's
Okay.
correct.
If it goes up to 2%, if we decide to make it 2% tomorrow, are you going to eat that 1%?
We'd eat it into our rate base at this time. Now,
Right.
the board has the opportunity, the choice to make that a line item on the bill, just like it would sales tax, and say, Rapid City gross receipts tax 2%. We have that option, is my understanding. As we're doing it now, we've considered it'd be better just to roll it into our rate base at this point, because the growth in Rapid City helps our entire membership. But if that gets to the point where it's, I guess, burdensome, the board might make that decision. I wouldn't say they would. I wouldn't speak for them. I don't know how I would recommend that, candidly, but they do have that option. And some co-ops have chosen to do that. We haven't, but some co-ops have chosen to make that a line item on the bill.
Sure. And I guess my point being is, I guess most businesses have to pass their expenses along to their customers at some point.
Exactly.
Maybe not now, but maybe in the future. So if we are continuing with this 1%, as it probably will be, I would assume, I guess I'm much more comfortable staying with the 1% and continuing to keep that relationship, so you don't have to raise the rates to your customers, and it's a better deal for the people of Rapid City. So I guess that's why I'm in favor of this motion. I guess I don't need a lot more time to discuss that or to think about it too much. So I appreciate you stepping up, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron Sasso.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, let me just question. May I direct a question to Pauline Sumption?
You may.
Are we typically coming out ahead on this 1% agreement?
Based on the history that was provided, I would say yes. Unfortunately, really, there's no way to determine today if it's the same thing with not being centrally assessed. But at this point, I have no reason to believe that we wouldn't be.
Thank you. I think when we're looking at the agreement and where we're at, and from the city standpoint, that we're being protected financially, I think is we're on good ground right now. And then I think from West River Electric standpoint, as well as their customer standpoint, I know having a set rate allows them to be able to project rates further out. Also, as a former West River Electric customer, I know a lot of times you guys will be looking at alternative sources of energy, and do you invest money in wind power and so forth. And sometimes I would believe having those projections in advance will make it a little easier to make those decisions. And I think for that reason, and also to not further burden staff time looking at this, if we're going to come to the same conclusion that we are coming out ahead as a city, I think that it would probably be best to approve this. I will support it and to move forward. So thank you.
Further discussion, we'll go to Amanda Scott. Amanda?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Johnson, I realize I cut you off and you've raised your hand several times, so I'm basically just buzzed back in to give you an opportunity. There was something else you wanted to add?
I just wanted to make it clear that when we make the agreement, we pay 2% on whatever that amount is. I want to make sure, 1%, excuse me, on what that amount is. So if this year's gross receipts, gross revenue in 2013 are X dollars, we pay 1% on that, and then we accrue 1%, and then we actually give a check to you in April of the next year in 2014. I don't know, I picked up that maybe you were thinking that we might have a different rate or something in 2015, or might accrue it ahead of time, estimating, okay, in 15 it's going to be this amount, so we make some kind of an adjustment in our books for that amount. We don't. We accrue it just like we do a sales tax. We say, here's the amount of the revenue from Rapid City. We take it times 1% at the end of March as an example, and that's what we put in our books. And we accrue it through the year for 2013, and then we give you a check in April of 2014. That's by statute. We have to pay it by May 1st of the next year. So does that make sense? I picked up that you were thinking maybe, and maybe I misunderstood it, we were like accruing it for 15 now, so we knew what it was, but we don't know what that revenue is going to be. So we pay based off of the revenue at that time, but it's just at whatever the council and us come to as an agreement. So
No, I understood that. My concern is that we're trying to set a rate for 2015, when, to be perfectly honest with you, or, you know, to be frank with you, looking at the development that's going on in the city, and it's pretty much, a lot of it on the east, basically in your area, that you're going to be picking up a lot of other customers. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around 1% of gross receipts for the entire cooperative. And I'm just trying to justify that it's fair on both sides. And it is kind of the middle of the road between the 0 and the 2%, but I'm just coming back to, I like to have the information before I really weigh in and make a decision on this and understand it. And I'm still trying to deal with the numbers. One thing that you did say is that if we went to 2%, it would be $180,000 estimated if it was this year. And you said that that would be significant. When I was just running the numbers based on the information that I was able to pick up from your monthly letters in the publication, to me, even if we went to the 2%, overall, in the overall expenses category, it would still be only 0.1% of your total expenses. And then I'm trying to understand that you would still, at this time, you are using it as a cost of doing business, and you're not passing it on to your customers. You said the board does have an option to specify that it goes back to the customers, but it would go back to all of the customers of the cooperative, not just the ones in Rapid City? Or could they actually define it down that it would, that total amount would go back to just hit just those customers within the city incorporated limits?
My understanding is it would be just on those within the incorporated limits of Rapid City. And one of the concerns I would have was we have a lot of businesses, fairly large businesses that are in that area. That would be a pretty significant hit for them too. And I guess that's the reason we really haven't taken that point to do that. So when you talk about, you know, as a percent, I look at it one of two ways. One thing is our power cost, when you look at it, is close to 50% of our cost right off the top of our revenue. So I mean, you know, when I look at that, I take that 50% out. A lot of times when we do information and stuff for the board, I always try to pull that out because that's kind of skews the figures. You know, if you pull that out and use your total operating and show them that way, it makes a big difference. And the other thing I look at it maybe this way is, you know, 180,000. Let's just say we add another 100,000 or 90,000. That's 2 to 3 employees of mine plus benefits that maybe I could hire down the road that I may say, well, you know, I don't mean to use that as, but that's an example I always use when somebody says something. Well, I could buy a line truck by saving that, or I could, you know, for my guys, or I could hire another person if I needed to, or maybe I'd have to hold that back. And we've done that the last couple of years. You know, I'm short-handed right now just because we've had the building. We've had a lot of power cost increases. I've really been hesitant to put people on because, frankly, I don't like to raise rates to do it. So we've been, you know, really running short at that point. So I look at it that way too, just as a, but I understand your concerns too, and I appreciate those.
Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Mr. Johnson, I have a question before we proceed to further council lights, because I think this might help shed some light on the discussion. How many how many agreements do you have with cities like Rapid City? Do you have any agreements with any other cities, West River?
For us, no, because this is the only town that we do not serve a majority of. The other ones, New Underwood, Wall, Box Elder, of any size, I guess you'd say is the only ones. Otherwise, we don't serve any incorporated cities.
I think that was alluded to before, but that leads to my follow-up question, which is, do you know how many other cooperatives in the state have similar agreements with cities, whether it's East River or Aberdeen area?
I have the figures in here, and I don't have them right off the top of my head, but I believe there's like 16, I think, total, and I think there's like 8 of them that have an agreement, and they run anywhere from two I know in the information I had have a 0%, and I think the rest of them all have ranging anywhere from 1% to 2%.
And this is
set.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So this is set in state statute or by the Public Utilities Commission?
As far as the percentage, that's the percentage is set in state law, 0 to 2%. We come to the cities, like you folks, and negotiate what that rate's going to be. And so that's what we're trying to do here is, you know, we've had it at 1%. We're trying to negotiate that rate.
And if you were essentially assessed, your guess is that it would be $38,000.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so we're talking $38,000 versus $93,000 $188,000 at 1%, and then, of course, $186,000 at 2%. Okay, so we'll go to the further council lights, and then before we proceed to a vote, I'll have some more comments. Steve Laurenti.
Call the question.
Question's been called. Any objections to calling the question? We do have an objection. We have a motion to call the question. We'll take that as a motion. We have a second to call the question. We have a second by Lewis, and we'll proceed only on whether or not to end debate on this item. A yes vote is to end debate. A no vote is to continue debate. All in favor of ending debate, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Here. Roll call, please.
Doyle. Lewis. Roberts. Yes. Wright. Yes. Laurenti. Aye. Sasso. No. Clayton. Aye. Nordstrom. Yes. Scott. No. Motion is approved.
Okay, we will proceed directly to the vote. The motion is to approve the agreement as is. No further discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Here.
Motion carries with 1 no from Amanda Scott. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion.
Thank you, folks.
Item number 55. Amanda?
Item number 55, request from Jackie Giacco from Native Sun News to print city council minutes. I make a motion to continue this item until the first council meeting in April, in order to give staff some time to give us some recommendations of a funding source, as well as the pertinent notifications that should be published in a second paper, in order to get that diversified notification out there for public safety, health, and those types of things. If I could have a second?
Go ahead.
I visited with Jackie a little bit before tonight's meeting and stuff, and we've been talking about this. I know, Jackie, you have requested the minutes only. My main concern is making sure that if we are going to utilize a secondary source for getting publication or information out to our citizens, that it would be more poignant to get the safety and the health and the welfare notifications out. And I think the best person to be able to identify those types of things, and I know it puts an extra burden on, but unfortunately is our finance office, because they're the ones that basically set up all the publications in the first place. So I would just like to have, I understand you just want the minutes, but I would like to consider a funding source as well as the totality of what those notifications should be if we're going to go ahead and engage in the cost of a duplicate publication.
I agree with you.
Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Ron Sasso.
Just question for Pauline Sumption. As what would you, I guess, see as one, the projected cost if we're looking at just the minutes, and two, the best funding source? Would that be undesignated cash or?
With all due respect, if Amanda's motion goes through, I will be given time to look at that, because I have not looked at that myself.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Further discussion? Ron? Jerry Wright. Jerry? Question's been called. Any objections? Seeing none, we'll proceed directly to the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 56, this is the Art Alley discussion. And Pepper Massey, you're welcome to come up and finish your presentation.
Are you sure? I bet you don't want us to begin at the beginning. I think we can page through. Where were we? I think the mayor told us to stop when we got to the page with all of the writing on it. Next page.
Here we go.
There we go. Let's see. There was discussion at the panel discussion that we had about forming an artist guild. And some of the things that we feel that the artist guild could do would be, do you want to speak to this, Tyler?
Sure. Some of the key points that the Artists Guild will help with is to help artists develop a more open and welcoming community, take responsibility to help with the alley cleanup and improvements. An example, a monthly Art Alley Cleanup Day. And in that sense, you know, it'll start to teach them to take more of a responsibility of Art Alley above and beyond just painting in it, to really instill that sense of ownership over this place that we create in. Actively participate in alley etiquette, educating new artists, spreading the message through organized painting events, Rapid City Arts Council programming, and social media. I think this is really key, and it's something I know from experience has worked and is working in the new formats, the programming that we're doing. I see this happening, and it's very important. Develop large-scale mural projects, setting a higher bar for the quality of work in there, and that will inspire others to do the same as well. We'll be looking for funding solutions. Some of these, one thing that you see in Art Alley is there's so much art and there's so much expression, and it's not all, you're used to looking at everything in a lined up in frames, and Art Alley is an entirely different and sometimes overwhelming experience. One thing that would break that up is if we started to fund large-scale murals like the ones that are currently going up in Art Alley. We've got 2 huge murals, and they're just amazing, and a lot of people are taking notice of these things. But they cost a lot, and they cost a lot to the artists who are creating them. It's something that the community could really get behind, so that's one of the things we'll be looking at. To rejuvenate the community's excitement for the alley, and to inspire artists to create large-scale works that have the potential to be funded without personal out-of-pocket expense. It should be noted that the community has in the past shown significant financial support to artists who are making an effort. I've been in the alley before, and when people see somebody putting in a significant effort and really making something special, they'll come up and just donate things. The last mural that was put up, somebody drove through and saw 2 artists who are friends of mine making a really large-scale mural like this, and the guy just happened to be driving through, and he donated like 10 gallons of paint, which is pretty significant, and so Art Alley really does inspire people, and I think that the community would support it in that way. All this builds off of the organic management style that was referred to at our public forum. It does not change the nature of the alley, which is important. It only improves upon it.
And I'd also like to comment that the Rapid City Arts Council isn't saying that we should have control over this specifically. We're certainly happy to take some leadership with public forums and doing research on it. What we believe would be ideal for this space, because it's owned by the community, and it will take building owners, business owners, the community, and the artists all working together to get behind this. And that's what we're hoping this initiative will do.
The mural that you see here is currently in Art Alley. It has been left almost completely untouched for several months, reaffirming the notion that as the quality of the work increases, the vandalism declines. These are the 2 friends that I was just speaking to, Focus and Amp. They began working on this piece 3 weeks ago. They just finished yesterday. It has not been touched. It should be noted that Amp is 19 years old and began painting in Art Alley at the age of 15. His pieces have always been highly regarded, and his early paintings can be found on the internet posted by people across the country. I wanted to show you this picture because this is one of the reasons that Art Alley is so special. The organic nature of how the community uses it makes it incredibly unique. We recommend using advocacy, educating the public on how to participate in the alley more effectively rather than regulating it. I just wanted to show you this is a graffiti art camp that I did a couple years ago with some kids at the Doll Art Center, and it was just an amazing experience. And as you can see, you know, the area that we're painting in looks quite cluttered, but it is being used in a very special way, and these kids were just thrilled to do this. And, you know, that's why this place is so unique. You see you hear a lot of negative things about it, but there's also a lot of special things behind what you see that aren't always attained just by visually looking at it. These kids, they really, really enjoyed this. So, thank you.
Thank you, and we'll go to Chad Lewis. Chad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to continue this item for 30 days. If I get a second, I'll explain why.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you for the second. I guess my reason for wanting to continue this item is to give the Arts Council, or the people working with Art Alley, they've started a dialogue with last week's meeting they had, public meeting, in which they've indicated to me they're going to reach out and speak to the property owners, try to get them together in a meeting. I would like to see a private solution before we get to bring it to the governments, before we bring it for this council and get us involved. To see if that's possible to work that out before you get us involved. To my knowledge, none of us are either building owners or artists that work in the alley up here, and I don't feel like it's something. I'm more than willing to step in and help out if we need to, if that's what we need to do. I just would rather not at this point, because to be completely honest with you, I completely appreciate the fact that these are private buildings, and you know, to paint on someone else's property, I think you probably need their permission. And if they don't want you to paint on their property, you should probably honor that as well. And so I think that's something that's very important. That's actually, in my mind, is almost more paramount than any other issue up here, actually. But I do very much appreciate Art Alley, and I appreciate the artwork and what it does for the community. I think we need to address some of the issues there that are obviously going on. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But I would like personally just to give the involved parties a chance to work it out privately, and if you can't do that, then by all means we can form the task force and continue and come up with a solution from up here. I just would rather, I'm more comfortable with you folks working it out yourself. That's my rationale behind it. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Charlene, what would the date of that council meeting be? 2 meetings out? April 1st. And that's the intent of your motion, to take it to the April 1st council meeting? We'll go to Richie Nordstrom.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor. Pepper Massey, I'd like to applaud you and your group for taking charge of this and the facilitating that forum that took place the other night, and the expertise that you brought to that panelist. Tyler, you and your group did an excellent job of making a presentation on that. There's a couple of things that I would like to have you try to do in this 30-day time frame, and I agree with Chad that I want to give you folks the opportunity to come forward with some ideas on how to address this issue. I like your idea about doing this organically by organic management. If you can address it that fashion, rather than us being on the city council trying to solve your problems, because I heard some people on both extremes trying to come up with solutions, but the people in the middle had some good, solid recommendations. Please take into consideration two things, and that is property management rights, and then also take into consideration safety. Some of these pictures that I'm seeing up here, it's not a large safety issue, but there's an example in one of these pictures that shows a safety issue. So if you can address those, I'd appreciate it. And then before we get into doing a task force, if you can address those issues first before you're coming back to here, and try to resolve them there at that level, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I say something to you there?
Sir, if we could wait, please.
Okay.
We'll go to Ron Sasso.
And I think one of the, I appreciate the motion that's on the floor. However, I also have some reservations of saying, okay, let's put this off as far as our involvement. And I understand on the one hand, it's a lot easier to say as a council, we don't want to touch this. There's so many pieces involved. And at the same time, I think because there are so many pieces involved, and I'm not a fan of task force typically, but I think this is one where there are so many pieces involved, where we have artists, we have business owners, and we have the community. And I personally, I want to see Art Alley stay. I also know that business owners need to also be part of that process, and I think as a city and as a city council, I think with the complexity of this, I think having a diverse task force that and having the DAL very involved in this process, as they already have been taking a lead on this, I think would be good for us. And that's my opinion right now on that. But I think that might be the best way to go. And this way, we don't allow ourselves to fall behind on this, and rather get ahead of it. Thank you.
If I could mention something before we go to the next two lights, because I think it will help clarify the discussion. If the council authorizes a task force tonight, it will not be appointed tomorrow. We're going to need at least probably 2 weeks, in all fairness, to allow people the opportunity to apply. Those would be mayoral appointments, council confirmed, so it probably would be the April 1 council meeting anyway before the appointments are approved by council. So if you want, you can pursue both. You can authorize the advertisement for the task force, and then if you decide that this other avenue is working so well, then you can simply table the appointments on April 1 and say, hey, I think we have a solution already in the works. Or you can use the city appointed task force to help validate the work of the other task force. It's up to you, but I just wanted to make sure that we go into this eyes wide open, that if you authorize the appointments tonight, the task force isn't created until the council confirms the appointments and we give chance for people to apply. And we've attached, for your convenience, we've attached the draft press release to the agenda tonight so you can see what we would be sending out if the council approves the creation of the task force. And we'll go to Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. First, comments on what the mayor had just stated as well. When you're talking about creating a task force, or when you're talking about dealing with the city council, we're not organic management. So by creating a task force, or if you're going to do that dual road, I'll tell you we're very, very concrete thinkers here, because basically a lot of the decisions we make are up or down. We already have city services that will enforce what the property owners want. We have city resources that will encourage what the Art Guild wants. So the city is here to help and to ensure that whatever decision the community comes up with goes forward. But I'm not so sure that you really want the city to get involved in this issue when you're dealing with organic management. So as far as the mayor's suggestion of doing a task force, I actually think that if the city council were to create a task force or suggest that path, I think it's too easy for a lot of people to say, well, the city's going to take care of it, so we're not going to continue. If you're going to deal with organic management, I think we need to hold off, as Mr. Lewis said, and give the community a chance to see if you can get the business owners, the Art Guild, the artist, the DAL, The people that like the art, as Michael explained, you know, the people in London and England, they can all weigh in, and I'm sure you'll get some great ideas. You guys don't want me deciding what's art. I'm telling you right now. I like uniformity. So that's just one opinion. So I really think that you need to keep this and retain this out there. As Mr. Terry said, he's one of the business owners, or Terry Nelson said. You know, this kind of grew on its own, and when it first appeared, even the business owners were on board. But some things have happened as an organism grows. There's always some bad things that come up, and, you know, that's why we have doctors and we have, you know, pharmacies, and we kind of cure the things that, you know, come to light that kind of, you know, detract from the beauty of something. So it's just my opinion, but I really do want to give the community an opportunity first to try to see if stakeholders can come together and can kind of formulate a plan, because I'll tell you, listening to everybody come forth already, the stakeholders that have come, even the business owners, there is no solution yet coming forth, and yet everybody is conflicted in this. And being that said, I really think you guys need time as a community before you bring it to us. Because unfortunately, when we make a decision, it goes into effect, and it's kind of hard to change it. Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Go to Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Chad, I appreciate your comments, because it's I can wholeheartedly support that. And I think these groups, as they've already had one get-together, I think they're already going down the road of hopefully putting together a private task force. And I would strongly encourage you to continue down that road. And I think a task force is the right thing. But I think I'm going to echo what you just heard from Alderwoman Scott, is that the last thing you want to do is get us involved. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm going to wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think because of the way that it started and the popularity of it as it has progressed, now some more negative things have happened more recently, but I think the stakeholders, as we've already pretty much defined who they are, and I agree with Alderwoman Lewis, or Alderman Lewis, sorry about that, sir. I'm familiar with your gender, sorry. But I think it's really important that obviously one of the biggest stakeholders is the building owners. Obviously, there's a lot of deference being paid to them because you have to have their okay. And I think the artists have a huge vested interest in wanting to express themselves in some of the wonderful stuff I've seen there as well. And so I think a task force is the right thing, but it needs to be a private task force. And I think it can be done by those people who are the big stakeholders, the artists and the owners of those buildings. And so I would like to see what they can do privately before the city ever gets involved. I prefer not to have the city involved at all. I think it will hamper the creativity of the alley, and I don't think it will help. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And once again, I want to make sure that it's understood that, from the property owner's standpoint, that your rights are paramount in my mind. I'm a property owner myself, so if I have to make a decision based upon purely on whose right it is, you're going to win probably. I don't think that's necessarily the best thing for the community. I don't think it's the best thing for the artists. And I would like to see you guys be able to work it out. And I would like to see someone bring back a recommendation in 30 days, and if you guys can figure something out and work together, that's kind of what I'm looking for here. Like we've talked about here. If we're not involved in this process, you folks are down in the battle lines, so to speak, in the trenches, and you're working on it every day, and you've got the relationships, and hopefully you're establishing better relationships for this process. That's all I'm looking for here. I mean, look, it's taken us 3 hours to get through 57 items on this agenda. I mean, I don't really think we want to be messing with this more than that. If you can't come to us with a solution or a reasonable ideas within that time period, I think then by all means we appoint the task force, we move on, and we deal with the situation at that time period. But right now, I'm just thinking you guys are the dialogue's going. I don't want to jump in and interrupt it, but Mr. Nelson or someone, you guys look.
Can I comment?
Sure, by all means.
First of all, it's bigger than Art Alley. I tried to explain to you, it covers all of downtown.
Right.
You were interested in downtown, you're interested in economic development for the city.
Sure.
And it's more than two parties. It's more than property owners and artists. You've got a situation where you're going to need legal, such as what are the ordinances right now in the city, for example. You've got buildings being destroyed, so where's historical preservation? That's another party that's not involved. I really think we need the leadership of the city to set up a task force, not just Artists Guild and the property owners. It affects all of Rapid City. It's an economic issue as much as it is an art issue or a business owner's issue. And I just think that we need your leadership. And if we don't get that, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry. Thank you very much for your time.
And I appreciate, and sir, I do appreciate what you're saying. All I'm saying is I'm just trying to give the private sector a chance, you know.
Can I say a little bit to that?
Moment, please.
Just a breathing
Chad still
period
has the
there
floor.
to figure it out. And if you can't, we're all, by all means, we can solve your problem for you, or we can at least try to. I'm trying to give the businesses and the individuals a chance to work it out amongst themselves. That's all I'm trying to do. That's my intention of my motion, intention of what I'm saying up here.
The problem is there's there's many ththings that they cannot address, and I'm all for this. I'm absolutely for them, but when I was looking at this task force, they was talking about there's police, fire, there's the lights in there, there's the cameras needed, the lighting and the cameras needed. These are things that they cannot address, and although they can work with the property owners, they cannot address the vandalism on the roofs, the shutting off of different areas, and so forth. So I think that you're dropping it down to people that can't do too much. The other thing is the financing. If this task force goes into place, then the bid board could be on it. The downtown, the destination Rapid City, the summer nights. This would be ways to bring financing into that location. Right now, you're giving somebody with very little power a big job that people that had a lot more power have turned down. And I don't think that they're going to be able to do the job. They're not going to be able to get lighting in there. They're not going to be able to get the police in there. They're not going to be able to solve the problems with the roofs or some of the drunks or the vandalism. So that's what I'm saying. Now, if they can do it, great.
So I guess, and part of that discussion I'm talking about is not just them. It's also the building owners too. I'm trying to get everybody that are the stakeholders here to buy in and talk to each other a little more. And then maybe it's as simple as you folks to come forth with your recommendations and you say this is what we think should be done, rather than us forming a task force of people that aren't, you know, if you say you guys get together and talk in the next 30 days and say this is what we think should be done, then we will work on those problems individually or together. And if it doesn't work out that you folks find you can't really come to a solution, by all means, we form the task force and we go from there. I'm just trying to give the people that are there every day a chance to work on it and to deal with it before we get involved. Because honestly, sir, I'm more than willing to do that. That's my job and I will do it. I have no problem stepping up and taking responsibility. I just believe in empowering people to do more and rely on their government less. And I understand the government can only the government can fix certain situations, but I do believe we have ordinances in this town that are it's against the law to do graffiti on people's paint legally and stuff like that. I mean, I think there's things we can enforce. The police can already enforce. So as far as the outside of Art Alley goes, so I think
there's some big conflicts. That's what I'm saying between having this the doll and the property owners,
right?
Because there's very differences of opinion.
And I realize that.
Not necessarily mine.
And if it doesn't work out, then by all means come back here and we'll say, okay, it didn't work. We'll try it. But I just believe in trying to let people solve their own problems to start with. So that's my point. Thank you.
And now we'll go to Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There have been a lot of comments tonight, and this is like I said to Aaron earlier in the week or last week sometime, it's a complicated issue. Who really has the power? I have to ask that question because the city didn't give anybody permission to paint on the buildings downtown. And we've had property owners say, well, we liked it at first. So to me, that power was really taken away, and so the question comes down to who created the problem, who allowed the problem to continue. There's always that risk. It started out beautiful. Now there's some things that are going on that are less appealing, that are maybe less safe. There obviously are some issues. But is it the city's job to fix when we weren't allowing it to happen in the first place? I think it's a valid question. As far as the composition of a task force, where there are no guarantees either. We can't force historic preservation. We can't force bid board. We can't force anybody to apply. We've had task force requests before, and it's all one-sided because that's who applies. And so there's really no guarantee if we take the helm and try to create that either. I think through a public effort, I mean, there was a fantastic showing at the Doll last week as far as a good cross-section of people. I think it's a good starting point. You can always invite the police department to come to these meetings and to come to these discussions. But I think what it boils down to is property owners' rights. If you say as a property owner, done, then we're going to have to enforce it. But because you've allowed it, it's in that gray area where we don't know. And there still hasn't been a recommendation forward that says we want this stuff stopped. As far as lights and cameras, please don't interrupt, Mr. Taylor. As far as lights and cameras, why can't the property owners put those up? Is that the city's responsibility? I mean, these are the questions I have, and I agree with many of my colleagues up here that you put it on our laps right now, it's going to become even more complicated. But we need to know, what if what we decide isn't what the property owners want or what the artists want, or we make the situation, the dynamics worse? I do believe that if you guys can communicate and start bridging that gap, whatever has been created down there, get together, roll the sleeves up, figure it out what it is you really want and where that compromise is. Come back to us, let us know that, how we can support it. I think then a task force is going to be beneficial, or any direction or support from the city. There are too many unanswered questions right now. And again, without being able to guarantee the composition of the task force with people that can get the job done, we'll still be having this conversation. So, thank you.
And Richie?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to caution you folks, if you might wind up with what I call a camel out there, the camel syndrome. Essentially what it is a horse designed by committee. We're the committee, and you may wind up with a one-hump camel, you may wind up with a two-hump camel. That's the risk you're going to be taking if you ask us to take over on this whole thing. The other part of it is that there's some other things that you folks started to address, and I want to see you folks have that opportunity to continue that opportunity. I know Mr. Nelson back there is really advocating this task force. I agree with you, Terry, that is something that may come about. It is something I would like to hold off on for right now, because I'm concerned about the camel that would be poking its nose into this tent. The other part of it is that we are now currently interviewing a second candidate for the Journey Museum director, and those people have come in knowing about the Art Alley. They've been curious about it, and they're coming in from out of state, so they've heard about it. So they're very curious about it, and they want to take that opportunity to visit Art Alley when they do come into Rapid City for their interviews. So I just want to caution you about getting what you're wishing for. Thank you.
Jerry Wright.
Well, kind of a complex issue, isn't it? And my colleagues have pointed out if it gets in our hands tonight, we'd probably mess it up. I think if it got in total your hands, you'd probably mess it up too. It was over a year ago, I was called by an owner down there, and I thought about it, talked about it, what I could do, what we could do, and I didn't have an answer. And I've seen the situation slide downhill. But I think what's going to take to solve this problem is some effort. And we are the council. We represent the citizens of Rapid City. Therefore, I think we do have a part of this, and it's not to solve all the problems. But I think a task force ultimately is correct. I think Chad's approach to say come back in 30 days is good, because we're just beginning the public discussion on this issue. And I think that we need to use the scientific method of problem solving. First of all, define the problem. Second, collect data. Third, analyze it, come up with courses of action, adopt and implement and monitor. That doesn't sound very artistic, does it? I think that's what we need to do. And I think if the mayor would appoint one of us to work with you, I think that would provide the liaison that you would have with the council. We're not going to solve your problems or all of it, but I think we can help because of all the departments involved that have to be a part of it. So I think 30 days is a good time to cook and think, and I think that if the mayor would ask one of us to do that, I would hope that person would accept. And in 30 days, which is what, April 1st, we'll hear more, and maybe we'll make a decision then. We're not going to give up, but I don't think us appointing a task force right now is the answer. I think it needs to cook a little longer. Amen. That's my, thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. And in reading between the lines and what you said, you just volunteered to be the liaison.
Okay.
I think he volunteered Ron.
Well, actually, I was going to volunteer Ron.
We'll go to Ron Sasso.
But I think Ron would be an ideal guy, but I could help. But Ron, I had you in mind.
I'd like to make a substitute motion, which I feel will go down in flames. However, the substitute motion would be that we do proceed with starting to form a task force while also encouraging the DAL to continue with the process. And if I can get a second, please. Thank you. Couple things that as I'm listening to this, and I know there's not a lot of support for this, so I've got an uphill battle. But one, we're talking about a task force that, as the mayor pointed out, is going to take time to put together. Right now, we're at the beginning of March. 30 days from now, we're looking April. If things still aren't moving in the right direction, then we're looking at starting a task force. We're being pushed back to May, and by the time the task force actually starts moving, we're somewhere deep into the summer versus being a little bit ahead of the curve, being proactive, potentially having some resolution for summer nights, getting Art Alley into a better position. And again, it does affect everything. We're involved when we hear discussions about lighting and so forth. I believe that is something that the city could be involved with. It is a complex, it is a very complex situation. And I think the buck does stop with us, ultimately. I think the other part, when we look at a task force is a recommending body. They will send us recommendations. We may choose to say we're going to do nothing at that time. Or we may say we like this. We're not going to touch that. So it's not that a task force is going to give us binding recommendations. Ultimately, we still make those decisions. So getting that ball rolling and getting more structure for this could be beneficial. And I do think that if it's diverse enough, it will work. So, thank you.
John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chad. This is a very interesting, very complex situation, and I do agree with many of my colleagues here on the dais that once we get involved with this, it's going to really, really change. And I don't want to see that. I want to see what we had in Art Alley a year ago, 2 years ago. I mean, it was beautiful down there. Everybody was going down to look at it. Everybody wanted to be there during summer nights. Everybody, it was wonderful. And it did change. And one thing I'm hoping is with all the media attention, with all the talk that's out here now, the artists are going to see maybe this isn't what we should be doing. What we were doing, we were going down the right path. We were doing things that the people in Rapid City liked. We were getting attention nationally. We were getting attention in town. Maybe this will wake some of the artists up. And also, maybe it'll wake the business owners up, too, to what you guys want and what you guys need. But I think once we get involved, this whole thing's going to change so much, it's not going to be even near what we have today. So that's just my opinion. So thank you.
Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just pulling up my calendar here. Alderman Sasso, if I may make a request, I would support your amendment to, but delay it another 30 days to May 6th would be the first meeting in May 6th would be the first council meeting in May. So I could support your compromise on that. So to be willing to take a look at that.
Do you want to accept that as a friendly
developing
amendment?
of your task force.
Ron, you want to accept that as a friendly amendment?
I hate to
Exactly.
I appreciate the
Ron, it's either a yes or a no.
No.
Okay. All right. All right.
Here's my answer. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Everyone understands the motion? Charlene, can you repeat the motion?
The substitute motion is to proceed with the formation of a task force in conjunction with the private
Okay.
discussion.
And that's to bring the names back in 30 days for a council confirmation. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose?
Heard.
Okay, we're not going to do roll call on that one. So we're now back to the original motion. And the original motion is to continue this item for 30 days until April 1, correct? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries with 1 no.
Does that carry with it the token city council member offered to them? I will volunteer.
Thank you, everyone. And we have a volunteer to help you out. And by the way, Pepper, you can call me also, and we can see what we can do to provide some staff support to this to this committee. But I agree that the solution ultimately needs to come from you, although we are willing, if we need to help facilitate the solution. And that's what the task force was about. So.
And I appreciate that. I would like you to know that we are focused on this, and we'll be paying a lot of attention to it. And our job is to include as many people as we can who want to participate in the community. So, and we'll come back to you with our findings. It's a first step. We don't have a plan yet. We're working.
And I'm on the
Thank you
Arts
very much.
Council
And
already.
this will be
so I can-
coming back on April 1 for further discussion.
I'm on the Arts Council, so I can already kind of
Okay.
jump in there. Thanks.
Very good. Item number 57, this is to designate a new loading zone at 626 6th Street per property owner's request. Do we have a motion?
I
For
make a motion to
discussion.
approve.
Motion by Jerry Wright for approval. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Last call for a second. Motion fails.
Oh, Ron Sasso second.
Okay, it's seconded barely for discussion. Ron, you have the floor.
I think one of the things looking at this situation, I think several of us were there. I think we may be able to find a solution on this. I think even painting the loading zone as far as labeling it a little better than it is currently labeled might be the best cost-effective solution. But
Jerry Wright.
Well, I promised Julie my support, and she's got it. And I think what would be appropriate would be to provide a two-stall, it would take up 2 stall of the parking on 6th Street between Kansas City and the alley, directly in front of their store, marked, sign, provided by ordinance and so forth, and the one at the alley would be vacated. And my feeling is this, that store is an old hardware store that was built, and of course, the traditional customers and type of products that was brought out was carried out the door and to the car and so forth. With their current line of work and business and products that they supply, and with the fact that 6th Street was reconstructed without a center turning lane or a parking lane, it is made it more difficult for them to serve drive-in customers from throughout our area, region. And I think it's a way that we can assist them in surviving as a business, and that's important. That's our job. I don't believe in giving anybody special favoritism. I believe in giving reasonable options. And I think this is one. She talked about the alley, and they dock back there. I've been through the store, and I think in the interest of customer service, customer safety, customer relations, and economic viability of our downtown community, it's not a bad move. I don't think it's going to hurt us. If there's a super huge problem in the future, we can fix it. It's not the only place in town that has such an arrangement. And I support it. And I know she's here. If Julie has any questions of the owner, they're here. They've been with us all evening. And with that, I will yield the floor. I ask for your support.
Jerry, I have a question to help clarify
Yes.
the motion. Your motion is to create a new loading zone. This is moving, can you clarify, this is moving a loading zone. We're getting rid of one loading zone and we're creating another.
That is
Can you
correct.
help clarify?
I will clarify it as best I can. I have no graphics. In the east side of the 6th Street block that contains the Fry Paint Store, between Kansas City and the alley, there is a loading zone at the end of the north end of the east block at the alley, if that's clear. Maybe it's not. Right at the edge of the alley, there is a loading zone, stall. That one would be vacated. And in front of their store, there would be a repainted curb, and it would take, I think, 2 stalls to make it so they could pull in at a right angle and load a vehicle from side to one side or the other. Or I don't know why they couldn't back in unless there's apparently some issue with vehicles backing in a traffic lane, although we do it over here at Allied. We've done it in other places. We have trucks unloading freight on 6th Street all the time anyway. It's just a way of their customers loading their vehicles safely, the product being able to come out of the store efficiently and safely without going a half a block. That's all it's asking for. The loading zone would be 2 stalls instead of 1, be directly in front of their door, and it wouldn't be just dedicated to them, it'd be for anybody in the block. And I did talk to a couple of stores down there, and they have no problem with this. Is that description clear enough for everybody? If not, I could draw a picture.
Steve Lorenzi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and if I could, I'd like to ask community planning, if I could, to question, and possibly the police as well. I guess these are the 2 issues that are in my mind. One would be a precedence. Do we have any previous requests by downtown where they have loading and, and they're asking for some specific type of parking? If we have ever done this before, if we've had these requests before. And then for police, what the issues would be involved if we were to approve something like this, what kind of issues might they see or anticipate? So, Brett, if you could.
Yeah, well, I know we've had requests like this in the past, not only for parking, but for valet parking and things like that in the past. I haven't been around long enough to give you a long history of those, but we have had those requests.
None of them have been approved, or from your recollection?
None since I've been here. I'm not sure if Joel or Carl has history on any others, but that might be a question they can answer.
Terry, I don't know if you were making a motion to.
If I could, quick, Mayor. Actually, the existing loading zone there that's on the alley, just a little ways down from their business, was just added last fall at the request, I believe, of the Fries probably. So, it's not uncommon for us to mark different loading zones in different areas. We want to be a little careful on how many we do, obviously, because it impacts the parking spaces available, but it's not uncommon to mark parking stalls. So.
And then police, if you could, please.
We did have some concerns that we expressed at the Public Works meeting regarding the backing of vehicles into the spots in the downtown area. It is prohibited by ordinance. Additionally, what Councilman Wright is proposing is perpendicular parking if it's to be backed in at a 90-degree angle. And by ordinance, on-street parking is required to be parallel parking. There is no other place in the city that perpendicular parking would be permitted on the street. You know, places that occurs at, they've got a portion of the sidewalk or the right-of-way to use in addition to that. So I think if you were looking to accommodate this, you should look at adjusting your ordinance, and I believe that they would require some of the sidewalk to be used for that loading zone in addition to the street, for it to be done in a safe manner.
Thank you.
So
Thank
in
you,
other
Mr.
words, the motion on the floor, just so everyone understands, the motion on the floor would not change the situation completely because you still wouldn't be able to back in. Correct?
Correct.
And that would require an ordinance change.
And you can't do perpendicular parking either on the street.
You'd need two ordinance changes.
Probably both within the same ordinance.
We'll go to, you still have the floor.
It looks, do you have a question, ma'am, or do you have something that you can
I
add?
was wondering if I could add something.
Absolutely, if you would, please.
Thank you. I understand, you're not supposed to back up, and you said it's against the ordinance to do it. It's also against the ordinance, which we noticed numerous times, people pulling in, how do I say that? Yeah, they're doing U-turns, and that was witnessed quite a bit in front of our store, and that's against an ordinance, and people don't get in trouble for that. But the other thing is there have been allowances, and I have no problem with, way back when, Didier's had the hotel, all those parking spots probably had to be taken out to accommodate them years and years ago. And with the new supposedly presidential plaza, aren't there going to be special allowances for them? All that parking's going to go so they can have people come in and out. And like you said, it wouldn't be just us, it'd be for use with anybody, but the spot we did get this last fall, which I talked about, when we were very appreciative of it, really isn't useful because people are parking there. And a meter maid only comes around every 2 hours, and that does us no good. So if, like Councilman Wright suggested, possibly moving it in front of the store and painting it and doing it, and yes, the other places, we understand it's not for us, but perhaps it would make them think more and not park there, because you could have more signs and painted. And then the other thing, I forgot already, but I do appreciate everything you're doing. We just wanted to have people be able to come downtown, shop at our store, and not get a parking ticket. It's a huge negative. And all we're trying to do is load them safely from the sidewalk, because, like I said at one of the other meetings, somebody decided to take away the turning lane, and that's where all the service trucks parked. And then if we were loading them from the back, if they did pull in, and you wheeled around the dolly cart to load them from the back, or put a 12-foot piece of carpet in the back, people had a chance to drive over to the turning lane, because it was 3 lanes deep. Now they're coming right in the lane where people are loading. So it's a safety issue as well for us. So, but if you have any questions, I'll be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I yield.
We'll go to Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And a question, Julie, I didn't catch you fast enough, I'm sorry. I know some of the businesses that I frequent downtown, and yes, I've gotten parking tickets, but they have eaten the cost of that if I'm in there, like the massage, hairstyle, things like that.
Yeah.
Have you considered
we
doing
have.
that and reimbursing your customers?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, we didn't know you couldn't back up to a sidewalk. We didn't know you couldn't load from a sidewalk. That's what brought all this on. There's nothing posted. And I think I said at the first meeting, the first people that brought it to our attention when they were on their way back to Spearfish had Wyoming license plates on their truck. They had backed up. They were putting in, renovating a business in downtown Spearfish. Wyoming people doing it in Spearfish, driving to Rapid City to get a lot of paint, and they got loaded up, came in to pay, went back out, and on their way back to Spearfish on the interstate noticed a ticket in their windshield. So, it would have been nice if nobody would have given them a ticket or put a warning on there and then kept track of their license plate and thought, well, we've given them a warning if they do it again. But as business owners downtown, we've never known that issue, that ordinance, ever in 30 years.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Richie Nordstrom.
Julie, if I may ask you a question. All you were originally asking for was the, not to have the city put parking tickets on the vehicles or your customers there. Right?
Yep.
That's all you were asking
We
for.
loaded up, we load up, a lot of contractors come in the morning, but then there's people who get loaded up throughout the day, depends on when. And, yeah, it was just, you can tell if somebody's backed in a pickup, I mean, chances are you're getting something loaded. It's not a standard way for people to park, so.
And unfortunately, since now we know that's not a good thing to do, we'll be able to correct that, correct? You'll be able to address that with your customers, correct?
Well, we won't know that they're backed in. I mean, you've seen our counters way in the back where we're ringing people out and stuff, but if we go out and load them up and we see that they're backed in, is it okay if they just now, because in a loading zone, it's okay if you have flashers on if you're backed up. So now am I hearing you can't even back up with flashers on?
I'll defer that to Carl.
And yeah, and you can't greet a customer saying, oh, by the way, did you put your flashers on?
I'll just share with you that parking enforcement in the downtown area is kind of a complicated issue in that we try to not take a heavy-handed approach, and we try to be very lenient on some of these issues. And if we do see your customers or any other customers in the downtown area that are actively loading, even though that they have done illegal backing to get into the spot, we're most likely going to give them a friendly warning, ask them not to do it again, that type of a thing. But if there's a vehicle that's parked unoccupied, nobody's standing near it, which unfortunately was the case even for just a very small period of time while your customers were inside paying, the result is a $5 parking ticket, and I think that's fair under those circumstances. We've got to have some sort of we've got to have somewhere in the middle to keep the business owners happy so that, there is parking available. As you know, there is some congestion in your area. You've had repeat violations in your loading zone, which is a sign that there's nowhere for other people to park when they're trying to get somewhere on that block. And so that's kind of how it gets complicated for us. But we try to be friendly as we can and try to work with the people that are down there. But the worst case scenario is a $5 parking ticket under these circumstances.
And I agree, and we will pay. I mean, if people come in there and say something to us, that's fine, because we want to keep them happy. But on the other hand, there's nothing posted anywhere downtown. There's nothing posted. Do not back in. There's nothing posted at all. And I don't think it's fair to expect citizens to know something like that. That's just, sorry.
Sure. Julia, yeah, we can post a lot of things up there that we have in ordinance, and where did we draw the line? That's the question I have, is what should the customers know, or what should the citizens know? What's that line? And that's the part I'm struggling with. And then the other part, I want to congratulate you on having a problem like what I was seeing inside of your store, having to move your supplies from one side of the store to the other, and the issues of material getting stacked on top of other material, and so the customers have to have you assist them getting your products out to their vehicles. So it's a lot of work, and so I applaud you for having that problem. I understand the parking situation, but leading up to that, have you had an opportunity since you and I visited to talk to Hanny Shaffey next door about? He mentioned something, he could work with you on something, and I wasn't clear on the details, but have you talked to him?
But we've known Hanny for years, and there really is nothing that he can do for us. Those are his buildings, that's his property, that's his loading dock. He's renovated that part for himself, so we can't, if we were still able to rent it, we would be renting it. But we're not able to rent it because he's using it for the School of Mines things and then for his own storage unit. That's where his trucks back up and unload.
Yeah, and I understand that part of it, but my experience with Hanny is that he's tried to work with people and come up with compromises and so on. So I was just asking the question, have you ever had that opportunity to have a discussion with him yet?
We have not, because,
okay.
I mean, we've worked with Hanny for years, and we when we were done renting from him, we know that he needs his stuff for him. I mean, we tried to rent things longer, and that was not an option for Hanny because he needed it, and that's fine, it's his building. I can go talk to him, I don't know that it'll do any good. Again, it was just for parking in the front of the store.
Understand,
It
Julie.
was just for customers.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
I appreciate trying to work with you as well.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you. Should I go back now, or should I wait?
We'll now go to Bill Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just summarize, if I may. From everything we've heard, Public Works here, and all the discussions we've had, we've got ordinances that prevent backing. We've got ordinances that prevent perpendicular parking. So there's been a suggestion to move a loading zone that's existing in a parallel parking situation. Am I wrong?
I don't think it's parallel, is it, Jerry?
It's, okay, but to move it and put two together and then vacate another one. So if we vacate the one that's existing, does that then become diagonal parking? Do we gain parking spaces in one area and lose in another? What is the net?
A net loss of one parking space.
Okay.
If I might add, with the School of Mines down there, and I'm glad they have a building. I've got my husband and my daughter graduated from there. But it makes it a lot harder for customers to pull up, especially, I think it's Tuesdays and Thursdays they have classes, so those kids are everywhere. I mean, and they're there, and they need places to park too. But if we had that spot, we would be able to help customers easier. Otherwise, employees are parking in front of there. It's either students or employees. So it'd be really nice for customer, whether it's Kelly next door at Motions. I mean, she'll have a mom with 3 little kids, so it'd be really convenient for somebody there to pull in and help. And then Renner Engineering has people that just want to come in and drop off plans or pick up plans. So I would assume those are the ones you talk to. I'm not quite sure. But it'd be advantageous for them as well because their customers can't find parking either sometimes. So.
Any further discussion?
Donald Bliss.
Everyone understands the motion? Charlene, can you repeat the motion?
The motion is to approve the creation of the new loading zone with the elimination of the existing alley loading zone.
Okay. Everyone understands the motion? Seeing no further discussion, we're going to proceed to the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Here. Roll call, please.
Lewis. No. Roberts. No. Wright. Aye. Lorente. Aye. Sasso. Aye. Clayton. Aye. Nordstrom. No. Scott. No. Doyle. No. It fails 4-5.
Okay. All right, item 58, bids.
First item for bid is the Canyon Lake Dam Reconstruction Vision 2012 Phase 4 project. We received 4 bids on this, and the recommendation is actually to take it to Public Works Committee at the March 12th meeting.
Motion by Doyle, second by Scott to take to the March 12 Public Works Committee meeting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 59.
59 is for a 30-inch steel water main cathodic protection system rehabilitation project. We received 1 bid on this, and the recommendation is to award the bid to Gowdy Engineering, Inc. in the amount of $257,488.66.
We have a motion by Doyle and a second by Laurenti. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 60.
60 is for the 2012 annual 4-inch water main replacement project. We received 6 bids on this item. Recommendation is to award the bid to Hills Materials Company in the amount of $452,590.45.
Motion by Ritchie and a second by John Roberts. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 61.
The last bid is for a 1-package off-sale liquor license. This is the first time we have actually gone to bid on our package liquor license. We received 2 bids on this one. Recommendation is to award to Fresh Start Convenience Stores in the amount of $25,500.
We have a motion by Doyle. We have a motion by Doyle and a second by Roberts. What's the location of this particular store? Do you know?
You know, Charlene gave me that information, and I apologize, I don't have it here.
It's
with
not
me.
by the school mines, is it?
No.
Haynes Avenue.
And I want to point out, too, that these licenses used to be $500.
I would just like to, before we proceed to the vote, if that's okay, I'd like to make a comment on this. Currently, Rapid City has 47 off-sale liquor licenses, and previously the price, as Pauline had said, was $500 a piece, and we had a couple available last year, and it was a first-come, first-serve, and it really wasn't fair to businesses that wanted to have a crack at one of those licenses. The licenses are awarded on the basis of census, and so we didn't think that we would have any coming open until 2021, but we thought we'd get an ordinance in place just in case, and now we've had one come open, and it's gone to a competitive bid. So this is good for business and certainly good for the taxpayers. So thank you, Pauline, for putting this ordinance together.
Absolutely.
So,
And
any
Wade
further
helped, too, just for the record.
What's
Wade
that?
Nyberg helped, too, from the attorney's office.
Thank you, Wade. And he's not here, but we thank him anyway. So, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. We are now on items 62 through 72. Do we have a motion to open public hearing? Motion by Doyle, second by Nordstrom. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have one continuation item. We have a motion to continue the item until March 18. We have a motion by Laurenti and a second by Roberts. There is no public comment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We now close public comment. We have a motion to close by Doyle, second by Nordstrom. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're on consent public hearing items 63 through 70. Would anybody like to remove any of these items for separate consideration? Seeing none, can we have a motion to approve 63 through 70? We have a motion by Laurenti, second by Doyle. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item number 71. Jerry, can you read this into the record for us?
71, Section 26, 27, Township 1, North Range 7 East, a request by Highway 16 Properties Limited Liability Corporation to consider an application for vacation of section line highway for property generally described as being located west of South US 16 and South Decatur Boulevard. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Wright and a second by Laurenti. I didn't hear a word you said. You want to do that over again? I'm just kidding. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item 72.
Item 72 is the second reading, ordinance 5909, an ordinance amending section 1706 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described properties requested by Carl Murbach for the City of Rapid City Solid Waste for rezoning from General Agriculture District to Public District for property generally described as being located west of South Dakota Highway 79, South Decatur Boulevard. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Wright and a second by Laurenti.
Hear it again.
And by the way,
Listen
I know it's late, but this is an important item. This is the Johnson property that the city bought 10 years ago. It's now being rezoned from General Ag to Public District because at some point the landfill will be using it. So, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 73, bill list. Pauline?
Bill list is that which is before you at $4,524,768.33.
We have a motion by Doyle and a second by Laurenti. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We have a motion to adjourn. Motion by Doyle, second by Clayton. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.